Chapter 56. The green and red swords returned to their scabbards. Everyone was silent. Prince Yan's power shocked everyone. 2 peak rank 9 cultivators had been defeated without any resistance. Ning Chen was also shocked speechless. He had seen many battles between rank 9 cultivators, but this was the first time he had seen such an overwhelming difference in power. In the guest seat, Yin Ma Xiao's eyes flashed with battle intent. After a while, he suppressed it. It was not yet time for him to challenge the current legend of the Xia dynasty. Prince Yan's power made the Wushuang city master's face turn pale. He had never thought that Feng and Yu would be defeated so thoroughly. Only 20 years had passed, but the legend of the Xia dynasty had surpassed everyone in his generation. He had walked very, very far on the path of martial arts. Boom! While everyone was still in shock, Prince Yan walked to the center of the Silver Garden. He exerted force with his feet. Immediately, there was a loud rumbling sound. A bottomless crack appeared on the ground. How dare you! The sudden tremor woke up the powerful existence deep in Wushuang City. A terrifying aura pressed down from the sky, trying to stop Prince Yan from taking the sword. Prince Yan snorted coldly. The vital energy around him shot up into the sky. Then, with a boom, the aura in the sky dissipated and returned to nothingness. Even if you come out now, you can't stop me from taking the sword. I will take the Zhiga sword today. Prince Yan flipped his right hand and a vast suction force appeared. He slowly pulled the Zhiga sword out from the crack in the ground. The dark gold Zhiga sword appeared. Immediately, waves of heavy pressure spread out. This sword had been buried deep in the Silver Garden for thousands of years. It had absorbed too much qi of the earth, making the already heavy sword feel like it was weighed down by 1,000 pounds. Prince Yan pointed with his finger and sealed most of the qi of the earth. Then, he waved his hand and a dark gold light flashed. Another sword appeared in the sword rack behind Ning Chen. Crack! The wheelchair sank half an inch into the ground, crushing the bluestone floor below. You're going too far. In the depths of Wushuang City, a powerful consciousness quickly awakened. Just as it was about to break out, it was stopped by another aura. Let him go. It's just a heavy sword. It's not worth fighting over. Humph, the will from before snorted coldly. Then, it gradually retracted its aura and calmed down once more. On the main seat, the city lord of Peerless City clenched his fists so tightly that his veins popped out, but he was powerless to stop it. Even the old ancestor had spoken, what else could he say? Let's go. Prince Yan glanced at Ning Chen and turned to walk out of the Silver Garden. His steps were steady and no one dared to stop him. It's so hot that it's about to explode. Ning Chen sighed softly, then struggled to turn his wheelchair and follow. From then on, he became a die-hard fan of Prince Yan. However, this Zhiga sword was really heavy. Outside the city lord's mansion, Ning Chen looked at Prince Yan in front of him and asked curiously, Senior, have you already stepped into the Xiantian realm? Ha! Prince Yan smiled faintly and replied, no. This prince is also curious. How did you sneak into the palace? Suddenly, Prince Yan said casually, scaring Ning Chen so much that he broke out in a cold sweat. Prince Yan already knew about it. It was impossible for Zhang Sun to reveal this, so Prince Yan must have seen it himself. But when did he reveal this flaw? From beginning to end, he didn't have any contact with Prince Yan. How did he expose himself? Don't think too much. Your hand once touched the green sword. This prince knew then that you didn't cleanse yourself. Prince Yan walked in front and didn't stop. He continued to explain calmly, people have their own auras, swords have their own auras. The green sword has been with this prince for a long time and its aura is connected to this prince's. Anything it touches, this prince can understand. Ning Chen was shocked. There was such a thing in the world? It was too unbelievable. He had seen many 9th-level peak masters, but he had never heard of a sword aura. This Prince Yan's talent and martial arts talent were shocking. He was almost undefeatable. Ning Chen fell silent. He didn't know how to explain. His experience in the palace was too complicated. It couldn't be explained in 1 or 2 sentences. If you don't want to say it, then don't. There's no need to hesitate. Focus on our journey. Prince Yen smiled and didn't ask any more questions. He didn't care. Everyone had secrets, and he was no exception. Everyone's secrets didn't exist to satisfy other people's curiosity. He wouldn't force it. Ning Chen let out a sigh of relief. He really didn't know how to explain. After leaving Wushuang City, they weren't far from Sword City. However, the sky was getting dark. It was inconvenient for wheelchairs to travel. The two slowed down their pace. They were still walking. No matter how slow they were, they could arrive before dawn. Therefore, they weren't in a hurry. How much did you understand from the battle just now? Under the night sky, Prince Yen asked slowly as he walked slowly in front. Senior's green and red swords, one cold and the other hot. The Wind and Rain Master's swords each carried the image of wind and rain. Senior used the red sword to fight the wind. The wind helped the fire. As long as the fire didn't go out, the red sword wouldn't lose. As for the green sword, the rain is water. When it meets the cold, it condenses. Senior used the cold to control the rain. Ning Chen described what he saw word by word. In the battle just now, although Prince Yan's strength was completely suppressed, Prince Yan's battle wisdom was even more shocking. Among the 4 swords, Prince Yan chose the 2 most suitable ones instead of the 2 strongest ones. If they were talking about the strongest, then the sword that was the deepest in the sword rack could easily suppress the green and red swords. In addition, the blue ancient sword was also extraordinary. It wasn't inferior to the green and red swords. In front of them, Prince Yen nodded and said, "Remember, the sword is a killing weapon. It is also the king of weapons. To be a king, you must have both wisdom and courage. If you blindly show off and use your strength to suppress others, you will end up in a disadvantageous position." Ning Chen bowed and said respectfully, "Senior, thank you for your guidance." Prince Yen nodded and didn't say anything else. He continued on his way. Ning Chen followed behind and thought quietly. It was rare to see a battle between peak 9th rank martial artists. Especially at such a close distance, it was very helpful for his martial arts cultivation. Vaguely, he felt that he had touched something. However, when he sensed it carefully, the feeling disappeared. In front of them, Prince Yan's face flashed with surprise. He slowed down again. It seemed that this kid was close to breaking through. Martial arts 5th rank was a hurdle. Once you crossed it, you would see the world. If you couldn't, you would be a frog at the bottom of the well. This kid's foundation was so strong that even he envied it. It was the first time he had seen someone like this in his life. Once he broke through this hurdle, his strength would definitely increase by a lot. On the way, Ning Chen slowed down. He kept thinking. Gradually, the wheelchair stopped and didn't move forward. Prince Yen also stopped. He stood aside and didn't say anything. Boom! After about an hour, Ning Chen's aura spread out. The silver light shone brightly. The temperature within 10 feet of him dropped rapidly. The water vapor condensed and frost fell. Prince Yen guarded him quietly. His green robe was blown by the spiritual qi from all directions. In the sword rack, the green sword hummed lightly. It was very cheerful. In the next moment, the vast spiritual qi swept the frost into Ning Chen's body crazily. He broke through the hurdle and reached the peak of 5th rank. Prince Yen looked at Ning Chen, who was in the middle of the spiritual qi. Gradually, he frowned. There was another kind of aura. In Ning Chen's ocean of qi, the dark yellow cyclone spun faster. It wanted to forcibly seize some spiritual qi from heaven and earth. At this moment, Prince Yen moved. He came in front of Ning Chen in one step. He waved his hand and the Zhiga sword came out. Then, he pointed the sword lightly and the thick earth seal broke. Prince Yan's sword finger turned again. He concentrated and poured all the thick earth qi into Ning Chen's ocean of qi. With a painful groan, the two colors around Ning Chen flickered. His cultivation broke through again and reached the 6th rank. Tomes of Arcane. At the same time, Prince Yan's expression changed slightly. He was surprised. There was no mistake. It was indeed the Tomes of Arcane, and there were 2 volumes. If the Tomes of Arcane didn't appear when he broke through and they were close enough, he wouldn't have noticed. No wonder this kid had such a strong foundation. With 2 volumes of Tomes of Arcane, it was impossible for him to be ordinary. The excess thick earth qi was taken away. The Zhiga sword fell into silence temporarily. Prince Yan waved his hand and put the heavy sword back on the sword rack. Then he stepped aside and waited for Ning Chen to wake up. After a long time, Ning Chen finally stabilized his cultivation state. He slowly opened his eyes and bowed down respectfully. "Thank you for your help, Senior." Although he couldn't move during the breakthrough, his spiritual sense wasn't shut off. He knew what Prince Yan had done for him. This was a great favor. If there is too much thick earth qi, it will affect the sword's aura. Instead of sealing it in the sword, I'd rather give it to you. Prince Yan nodded and said calmly. For a heavy sword, the heavier it was, the better it was. The more thick earth qi, the better it was. He had sealed most of the thick earth qi for this reason. "Let's go. We've already wasted a lot of time. If we don't hurry, we won't be able to reach Sword City by dawn." Prince Yan turned and walked forward. Ning Chen nodded and turned his wheelchair to follow. He didn't know that Prince Yan had already seen the 2 golden pages in his body when he injected the thick earth qi. He also didn't know that the 2 pages were Tomes of Arcane. He only knew that Tomes of Arcane existed. He didn't know anything else. In the end, he hadn't been in this world for long. There were still many things he didn't know. Under the night sky, the 2 of them hurried towards Sword City. They didn't say anything and just listened to Ningyi. Finally, the 2 of them arrived at Sword City at dawn. This was an ancient and huge deserted city. There were very few people. They couldn't see anyone even after walking for a long time. However, this was the most dangerous city because anyone who appeared in this city could be an incredible cultivator. Sword City was the holy land of all swordsmen in the world, but it was also a forbidden place for them. Killing wasn't the only rule in Sword City. The only rule was that the strong were respected. On the streets of Sword City, there were traces of swordsmen fighting everywhere. Every sword mark was at least 2 fingers deep. Blood spilled everywhere. It had already dried up, but there was still a faint fishy smell in the air. After Ning Chen stepped into Sword City, he became anxious. He wanted to see Mu Qingxue, but he didn't want to see her so soon. He was afraid that his guess would become a reality. "Are you afraid?" Prince Yan frowned and asked softly. Ning Chen smiled bitterly, but he couldn't suppress his body's reaction. He was afraid that Mu Qingxue had forgotten about him. That qi that day was cold and indifferent. It was as if she had abandoned all emotions in the world. Could it be that in order to reach Xiantian, she had really cut off her past? "If you're afraid, why are you so determined to come?" Prince Yan frowned and asked. "I want an answer." Ning Chen said gloomily. "What if the answer disappoints you?" Prince Yan asked aggressively. Ning Chen's body trembled. He had thought about this question before, but he kept avoiding it. She was the first person to talk to him, the first person to spare his life, the first person to cut him, the first person to run away with him. How could she forget him? Chapter 57. Ning Chen felt terrible, extremely terrible. He did not know how to answer. If Mu Qingxue forgot about him, what could he do? Tie her up and take her away? She was the 6th nascent master in the world. If she did not want to, who could take her away? There was no snow in Barren City all year round. It was said that the sword in the city did not like snow. Therefore, all the snow in the world could not reach Barren City. After coming to Barren City, Prince Yen had been following Ningchen. If Ningchen wanted to find someone, he should lead the way. The wheelchair sank half an inch into the stone floor. Ningchen looked around Barren City. He looked at every street and every room. Prince Yen looked at Ningchen looking like a fool. He did not say anything and did not stop him. There were hundreds and thousands of streets in Barren City and tens of thousands of rooms. If he wanted to find someone, he could do it himself. How many times could a person be foolish in his life? He could see that this person was very important to Ningchen, more important than he could imagine. Most of his knowledge of Ningchen came from Zhangsun and the legends of the world. Until they met, he finally matched his impression of Ningchen with reality. The little eunuch mentioned by Zhangsun was mischievous and unruly, but he was loyal and trustworthy. The little hero in the legends was brave, smart, and respectable. The Ningchen in Prince Yan's eyes was cold, arrogant, and even cruel. However, such a person, at this moment, seemed to have gone crazy. He was weak, but also manic. Prince Yen followed behind without saying a word. His eyes were calm and unwavering, as deep as a lake. Ningchen's state was actually very dangerous. The biggest taboo in martial arts was to have an unstable state of mind. He had just broken through to the sixth realm. If he did not have a firm belief, his cultivation could regress at any time. However, Prince Yen could tell that the person Ningchen was looking for was much more important to him than his own cultivation. Therefore, he did not stop him or say anything. If his cultivation retreated, he could just cultivate again. Compared to the things he treasured in life, it was nothing. It had to be said that Prince Yen and Ningchen had the same understanding on this point. The barren city was really huge. Ningchen led Prince Yen to search the city bit by bit. There was no hope in his eyes, no sighs of disappointment. They just went in and out of the same place and kept repeating. Desolate City used to be a flourishing ancient city. It was even more powerful than Wushuang City. After the war, it gradually declined. Especially in the past 200 years, there were fewer and fewer people in Desolate City. If it wasn't for the sword in the city, it would have been taken over by Great Xia. In truth, Great Xia had not increased its territory in 700 years. The main reason was that the wars in the first 300 years were too frequent, and the people and soldiers were sick of war. No one remembered the previous name of Desolate City. Now, people either called it Desolate City or Sword City. No one cared what it was originally called. One day was very short. From the time Ningchen and Prince Yen entered the city in the early morning until now, the sky was getting dark. They had already searched countless streets and houses. When swordsmen saw the two of them, they would silently avoid them. In Sword City, there was no trust. No one wanted to cause trouble for no reason. Ningchen purposely stopped a swordsman. He described Mu Chengshue's appearance and asked him if he had seen him before. However, this swordsman had just arrived and was not much more familiar with the situation in Desolate City than Ningchen. In fact, everyone who came to Sword City was looking for traces of the sword in the past. They wanted to make a breakthrough. Everyone was looking for something, but they were looking for the sword while Ningchen was looking for the person. The figures that passed by each other no longer interacted with each other. Ningchen's irritation grew stronger as time passed. His cultivation that had just stabilized at level 6 last night was starting to show signs of loosening. Prince Yen squinted his eyes slightly but did not say anything. If he did not care, then let him be. Just as the sky was about to turn completely dark, in the distance, a black figure caught up with them. It did not take long for them to catch up. The eye-catching insignia on their black clothes showed that they were the Shadow Guards and Shadow Dragon Guards of Great Xia. There were 11 of them, 1 Shadow Dragon Guard and 10 Shadow Guards. All of them had powerful auras and extraordinary abilities. The leader of the Shadow Dragon Guards recognized Prince Yen and knelt down. He stood up and said respectfully, "Prince Yen, His Majesty has ordered us to bring Ningchen back. Please do not interfere." Prince Yen glanced at Ning Chen, who seemed to be oblivious and was still searching silently. He said lightly, "Level 9 stays. The rest is up to you." This. The Shadow Dragon Guard looked troubled. The level 9 mentioned by Prince Yen was of course him. However, Emperor Xia's order was to capture him alive. If he did not interfere, the chances of capturing him alive would be much lower. Who would have thought that Ning Chen, who couldn't even defeat an ordinary imperial bodyguard in the past, would escape from their hands twice? The first time, it was still fine because he was thrown off a cliff by God's son and luckily survived. But the second time, the former escaped from their sight with the help of the Empress's escort. Emperor Xia was furious because of this. Go and capture him. If he resists, kill him. The Shadow Dragon Guards hesitated for a moment and made a prompt decision. If they could not capture him alive, then kill him. They could not let this little eunuch escape again. Yes. The 10 Shadow Guards accepted the order and quickly chased after the figure in front of them. Ning Chen had just come out of a room and was about to continue searching for the next one when he saw 10 shadows surrounding him. The shadows blocked his path. Ning Chen's path forward was blocked. He could not help but become extremely irritated. He shouted, "Move!" The wheelchair moved forward towards the space between the 2 shadow guards. Ning Chen was in a bad mood and did not want to care about anything. Follow us back to the palace. The 2 shadow guards pressed their hands on Ning Chen's shoulders and said in a low voice. In his irritation, Ning Chen could not suppress the anger in his heart and finally exploded. Scram! A violent airflow spread out. Immediately, the 2 shadow guards felt their arms go numb and their bodies become unstable. They took 3 steps back. Kill! The sudden resistance left no room for negotiation between the 2 sides. The order to kill was given and the long swords were drawn. The intertwining sword shadows formed a sword net and fell towards Ning Chen. Among the 10 people present, the lowest cultivation was at level 5. The highest was at level 7. All of you deserve to die. Ning Chen, who was furious, lost his mind. He raised his left hand slightly and a dark yellow light shone brightly, enveloping the 10 people. Boom! In an instant, the unparalleled gravity caused the bodies of the 10 people to suddenly fall. Before they had time to react, they saw the ink sword being unsheathed amidst the drifting frost. Snowflakes surged, and an ink light streaked across, cutting through their throats. The moment of shock brought about the most drastic change. Before the 4 people could stabilize themselves, they fell to the ground with a bang. The 6 people were shocked and even angrier. As Emperor Xia's personal guards, they had never been trampled on like this. The remaining 6 people were mentally prepared. They formed groups of 3 and took turns attacking and defending. They did not rush forward recklessly. Ning Chen's eyes were as cold as frost. He held the ink sword in his hand. Killing people was his priority. Soon, the 7 people were all dyed red. Ning Chen controlled the chi of earth, which made the 6 shadow guards very uncomfortable. However, the advantage in numbers was still unshakable. Every time the 2 sides exchanged injuries, it was a sign that the shadow guards were one step closer to victory. After a long battle without any results, Ning Chen showed a trace of impatience. Taking advantage of the gap between the 3 people's attack and defense, he knocked away 3 shadow guards with a bang. The wheelchair took advantage of the momentum to retreat 10 feet away. Just as the other 3 shadow guards were about to rush forward, they saw the ink sword stabbed into the ground. A green ancient bow appeared in Ning Chen's hand. The next moment, the silver light shone brightly and a terrifying arrow flew out. The 6 shadow guards narrowed their eyes. At the moment of contact, the silver arrow penetrated their bodies and 2 shadow guards flew out. Their blood dyed the sky red. The momentum of attack and defense was broken. Ning Chen patted the wheelchair and 6 shadow arrows appeared. They turned into faint black lights and swept towards the strongest of the remaining 4 people. Clang! With a few soft sounds, the shadow guards blocked 5 dark arrows. However, the last dark arrow suddenly fell at the last moment and changed direction. The shadow guard trembled and stepped back half a step when the shadow arrow entered his body. At a distance of 10 feet, the chi of Earth was not enough to affect the 4 people. However, it was enough to affect one shadow arrow. And his shadow arrows had always been coated with medicine. It was not poison. It was just a strong anesthetic. Beside Prince Yen, the shadow guard was shocked. In just a few breaths, 6 of the 10 shadow guards were dead and 1 was injured. When did Ning Chen grow to such a level? If this continued, the 10 shadow guards would all be buried here. The shadow guard felt a chill in his heart. He could no longer care about Prince Yen. He moved and was about to attack personally. I said that the rank 9 will stay. At the same time, a calm voice sounded. In front of the shadow guards, Prince Yen blocked their path and did not allow them to take half a step forward. Prince Yen, you are disobeying His Majesty's order. The shadow guard was furious and shouted. Is it serious? It was a simple sentence. He did not care at all. Prince Yen stood calmly between the shadow guard and Ning Chen. He was like a tall mountain that no one could cross. You! The shadow guard was about to move again when he suddenly felt his breath stagnate. At the same time, he was shocked and fearful. Ugh! There was an indignant grunt. On the other side of the battlefield, the dark shadow guard who had been injured by the dark arrow was unable to escape the fate of death. Ning Chen, who had lost his patience, was no longer as shy and harmless as before. Every move he made was aimed at killing. The last 3 shadow guards who received Ning Chen's wrath became more and more frightened and cold as the battle went on. They had to guard against the strange dark yellow light and also had to be wary of the terrifying arrow light. Their moves were more defensive than offensive, and for a time, they were defeated again and again. After 10 moves, Ning Chen's lips curved dangerously. He used the same trick again. After using all his strength to push back the 3 shadow guards, he moved back in his wheelchair and stabbed the ink sword into the ground. The broken death appeared again. The 3 were shocked and rushed forward to stop this frightening arrow. However, the expected shadow arrow did not appear. Instead, it was a merciless shadow sword. After the shadow sword, a cold voice echoed in their ears. Idiots, I lied to you. Bang, bang, bang. Under their unwilling and incredulous gazes, the 3 fell to the ground and could not get up again. Chapter 58. Cough cough. Ning Chen covered his bleeding chest and coughed violently. Then, a silver light shone on his right hand and sealed the wound. He ignored it. As for the other wounds on his body, they were not fatal. It would not be too late to heal them after finding Mu Qingxue. Ning Chen continued his search. Not far behind, the dark dragon guard's face turned ugly. He stared at the person in front of him and said sternly, Yen Qin Prince, I will report what happened today to His Majesty. I hope you can take care of yourself. Ha! Yen Qin Prince chuckled and followed Ning Chen. I'll be waiting. Hearing this, the dark dragon guard's face changed again and again. Then, he turned into a ray of light and flew back the way he came. He had to report what happened today to Emperor Xia as soon as possible. Ning Chen's growth was too terrifying. In just a few months, he had surpassed all the dark shadow guards. There was also the bow in his hand, which was a great threat. Even he felt a trace of pressure from the arrow just now. After the dark dragon guard left, Ning Chen and Yen Qin Prince did not pay attention to him. They continued to search house by house and street by street. The night was long. Under the moonlight, the figure on the wheelchair was tired and stubborn. Behind him, another figure followed without a word. Suddenly, the world changed. Above the 9 heavens, a sword light shone like the moon. With a boom, it slashed towards the distance. Bang! Another powerful aura blocked it. It was a bit weaker, but it could still fight. Mu Qingxue. Ning Chen's body shook. He looked at the sword light above the 9 heavens. Then, he moved his wheelchair and rushed forward. There was no mistake. It was definitely her aura. Yan Qin Prince frowned. He walked a few steps quickly and turned into a ray of green light to follow. In this short period of time, the two strong cultivators had already exchanged more than 10 moves. Their figures could not be seen clearly, but they were so powerful that it was scary. After a while, the battle stopped. The moon above the 9 heavens slowly descended. Her clothes were as white as snow. Her perfect face was cold and emotionless, without a trace of human emotions. Mu Qingxue. The black wheelchair stopped. Ning Chen looked at the beautiful girl in front of him. At first, he was happy. Then, his smile froze and disappeared. His heart also sank. The beauty that entered his eyes was just like her coldness. It was perfect yet unreal, so distant that it was untouchable. The coldness in his eyes was like a knife or a sword, cutting Ning Chen until he couldn't breathe. She had really forgotten about him. The sudden heavy blow made it difficult for Ning Chen to suppress the injuries that had accumulated in his body for a long time. He grunted and vomited blood. The next moment, the dark yellow and silver auras around Ning Chen's body flickered continuously. His state of mind changed drastically, and he could no longer maintain his unstable cultivation. He fell directly from the 6th grade martial path. Prince Yan's expression changed. He took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Yi Futian. He condensed qi with his finger and pointed at Yi Futian's qi si. Calm your mind. The Prince of Yen bellowed in a deep voice. He activated his cultivation technique by 30% and forcibly suppressed the raging vital qi in the former's body. Not far away, Mu Qingxue was quietly watching this scene. There was no change in his cold eyes. His realm fell and the heavenly book appeared. Ning Chen didn't care about his injuries and forced the golden paper of the life scroll out of his body. Then he vomited a mouthful of red blood, dyeing the heavenly book red. Do you still remember it? You gave it to me to strengthen my body. Ning Chen smiled brightly. Blood kept flowing out of his mouth and gradually dyed most of his clothes red. People couldn't bear to look at it anymore. Life scroll. Mu Qingxue's calm face finally changed. He didn't remember anything. Instead, he became even colder. You deserve to die. The cold voice destroyed Ning Chen's last bit of hope and perseverance. At this moment, a sword light as bright as the moon slashed down. Heaven and earth lost all colors. Boom! The moment the moon fell, the Zhiga sword was drawn and blocked this deadly sword. Prince Yan's expression was unprecedentedly serious. He said slowly, "With me here, no one can hurt him today." The life scroll that was dripping blood floated in front of Ning Chen, but it couldn't call back the lost memories. From now on, they would be separated by the horizon. Hee hee. Crazy and soulless laughter echoed in Desolation City. It was so desolate under the night sky. Clang! The swords collided. One heavy and one fast. Prince Yen held the Zhiga sword and faced Mu Qingxue, who was in the nascent realm. The battle reached a climax in an instant. A legend versus a nascent realm. It was supposed to be a battle of great disparity. However, because the swords in their hands repulsed each other, it became a stalemate. At this moment, another powerful figure came. After seeing the life scroll in front of Ning Chen, his face darkened. It turned out that the life scroll wasn't in Princess Miaoyu's hands that day. It was in the hands of the person in front of him. God's son's aura was a bit messy. Just now, he used up a lot of energy in the battle with Mu Qingxue. After a short rest, he barely recovered 70% of his energy. Prince Yen couldn't help but frown at the appearance of the new powerhouse. His Zhiga sword became even heavier. The thick earth energy spread out, trying to slow down Mu Qingxue's extreme speed. Not far away, God's son slowly walked over. His figure flashed a few times and arrived in front of Ning Chen. He pressed his palm down without hesitation. This person deserves to die. Bang! At this critical moment, another sword flew out from the sword rack. Prince Yen arrived in the blink of an eye. He gripped his left hand and held his sword in front of Ning Chen, blocking God's Son's palm power. I said, today, no one can hurt him. Prince Yan's expression was calm and serious. His tone didn't allow any doubt. 2 swords against 2 geniuses. The legend of Xia stood in front of Ning Chen alone, protecting this last line of defense. He didn't allow anyone to take half a step in front of him. Mu Qingxue, God's Son. Both of them were aiming for the life scroll. However, they were stopped by Prince Yen. Their eyes were unusually cold. Swish! The beautiful snow-colored figure moved. Prince Yan's Zhiga sword moved at the same time. The thick earth energy and his own perception of the sword energy barely blocked Mu Qingxue's sword. At the same time, God's Son moved his feet lightly. His palm moved like wind and thunder. The blue ancient sword in Prince Yan's left hand used softness to overcome hardness. Endless blue water light received the power of wind and thunder and scattered it into the ground. Facing 2 of the most powerful geniuses of the younger generation, even the legend of Xia dynasty put 10% of his offense and 9% of his defense. He was surrounded by danger. Every move was fast and heavy. His palm was strong and his sword was soft. The 2 swords faced the enemy from the left and right. There was no gap between attack and defense. However, he gradually showed signs of being unable to hold on. After a dozen or so moves, Prince Yan's halting spear slowed down by half a beat. Immediately, the Chengying sword flashed past, and a piece of green cloth silently floated down from his right sleeve. The King of Yen frowned and looked at the sword in the depths of the sword rack. A hint of hesitation flashed across his heart. It was already difficult to deal with Mu Qingxue with the sword in his hand. With God's Son, he had no chance of winning. In the moment of hesitation, Prince Yan's sword power was insufficient. His left hand that was holding the sword couldn't help but feel slightly numb. Prince Yen sighed helplessly. When he finally made up his mind to pull out the sword in the deepest part of the sword rack, suddenly, an earth-shattering aura exploded behind him. 3 terrifying arrows shot out like stars and moons, shooting towards the Son of God in the middle of the battle. The sudden change broke the stalemate. Prince of Yen moved his body and understood. He combined the 2 swords. The Zhiga sword knocked away Mu Qingxue, and the blue ancient sword released a vast water wave. Then, he grabbed Ning Chen and turned into a beam of flowing light, flying away. Mu Qingxue was about to chase after him, but he was trapped by the wave of water and slowed down. Boom, boom, boom. On the other side, God's Son took 3 steps back after receiving 3 arrows. Although he wasn't at his peak, he was still unharmed. Prince Yen brought Ning Chen 100 miles away from the barren city before stopping in the wilderness. It wasn't that he didn't want to continue, but that Ning Chen couldn't hold on any longer. The last 3 arrows had completely exhausted all of Ning Chen's energy. Even if he was at his peak, he didn't try to draw the second arrow. Not to mention shooting 3 arrows consecutively when his injuries were worsening. Hold on. Prince Yan's heart sank when he saw the chaotic aura around Ning Chen and the blood that kept flowing out. His previous injuries were still manageable, but after his realm dropped, the scattered aura rushed in all directions, worsening his injuries by several times. What was worse was that the true essence in Ning Chen's Qi Si, which was used to suppress his injuries, was also used up in an instant. He couldn't stop his injuries from worsening. Ah! With a muffled groan, Ning Chen's body swayed. He immediately turned his head and vomited a mouthful of blood. His consciousness gradually faded. Ha! Prince Yen stepped forward and poured his vast aura into Ning Chen's body, forcefully suppressing all the true qi in his body. This can't go on. After a while, Prince Yen stopped. He knew he couldn't save people, so he had to think of another way. He grabbed Ning Chen with his right hand and turned into a stream of light, flying away. Not long after the 2 left, a beautiful figure in white appeared. She glanced at the blood on the ground and frowned. She immediately turned and left Wushuang City. Prince Yen brought Ning Chen and flew quickly. He pushed open the gate of Prince Tai's residence and directly rushed to the front hall. In the next moment, a heavy shout resounded through the entire residence. "Second brother, quickly come out and save him." That shout roused everyone in the residence. Prince Tai quickly arrived in the hall. Seeing Prince Yan's somewhat chaotic aura, his heart sank. This was clearly the sign of a huge battle. He understood his third brother better than anyone else. Thus, he was even more aware of Ning Chen's extraordinary accomplishments on the martial path. There were only a few people in the world who could force him to this point. Prince Tai was just about to ask when Prince Yen raised a hand to stop him. "We'll talk about the rest later. Save him first." Prince Tai finally noticed Ning Chen, who was leaning against his wheelchair. He reached out to check his pulse, and his expression gradually became unsightly. What a chaotic pulse! Prince Tai's doubts grew. The chaotic true qi in Ning Chen's body was clearly a sign of his cultivation technique collapsing. But with his third brother here, how could such a thing happen? What shocked him even more was that this person wasn't a eunuch. At this time, Xia Nianyi also arrived in the hall. Looking at the unconscious Ning Chen covered in blood, she strangely didn't feel any joy in her heart. Instead, she felt a complicated and indescribable heaviness. In the hall, Prince Tai temporarily suppressed the doubts in his heart. He looked at his third brother and said sternly, "Do you know how much of a price it will cost to save him?" In this world, there was no gratuitous favor, and there was no unrequited favor. He couldn't help anyone. Prince Yen didn't answer. He only said two words in a deep voice, "Save him." Prince Tai frowned again. Looking at Xia Nianyi's stubborn appearance, he finally nodded helplessly. "Nianyi, go get the heaven reversal pill." "Yes." Xia Nianyi responded and immediately ran to the pill room. Xia Nianyi left. In the hall, Prince Yen looked at the miserable Ning Chen in the wheelchair and couldn't help but sigh. Time only left a name, not mercy. Chapter 59. Xia Nianyi quickly returned, holding a box carved from green jade in her hands. Opening the box, there was only a longan-sized pill quietly lying inside. There were millions of pills in the world, but very few of them had the qualifications to have the word heavenly in them. But any pill with the word heavenly meant it was inextricably linked to the Xiantian realm. For example, the Xiantian pill in the Grand Xia's imperial palace, or the heaven reversal pill in Xia Nianyi's hand. The word heavenly was just like its name. To the current Ning Chen, it was one of the few pills that could save his life. As soon as the pill entered his mouth, its vast medicinal energy erupted. It was powerful and domineering, directly charging into his qi. Ugh! Ning Chen let out a pained groan as he frowned. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Imperial Prince Yen frowned and stepped forward. His right hand formed a sword, and he poured his true yuan into Ning Chen's qi. Using the domineering medicinal energy, he repeatedly combed through Ning Chen's chaotic meridians. This heaven reversal pill's medicinal energy was too domineering. If the person who took it didn't have a Xiantian or someone infinitely close to the Xiantian realm to help suppress it, they would probably die before the pill could even be used. Fortunately, Prince Yen was here. After a long while, Ning Chen's injuries gradually stabilized. Seeing this, Prince Yen pointed his sword finger and sealed most of the medicine in Ning Chen's body, leaving only a little to help him recover. After that, Imperial Prince Yen retracted his hand and let out a tired sigh. "Third brother, you have to think this through. His identity might bring you a lot of trouble." Imperial Prince Tai waited for Imperial Prince Yen to finish before warning him. Someone who hadn't been cleansed had actually stayed in the Imperial Palace for so long. Once this matter was exposed, it was easy to imagine how big of a commotion it would cause. The Xia Emperor definitely wouldn't allow such a scandal to spread. He would definitely kill everyone who knew about it. Imperial Prince Yan's identity was special. Although he wouldn't be killed, it would definitely arouse the Xia Emperor's suspicion and dissatisfaction. Imperial Prince Yan's expression didn't change at all. He slowly said, "Don't worry, second brother. I know what I'm doing." Imperial Prince Tai sighed and didn't say anything else. He hoped Imperial Prince Yan really did know what he was doing. The current Xia Emperor really wasn't a benevolent ruler. 10 days later, Prince Yan left Prince Tai's mansion with Ning Chen, who had just recovered from his injuries. Ning Chen's injuries couldn't be healed in a short period of time. However, as long as he didn't use force, he wouldn't explode easily. The heaven-revolving pill was omnipotent, but it was not omnipotent. It was not easy to pull Ning Chen back from the gates of hell in one piece. As for the cultivation he had lost, he could only rely on himself to regain it. He had already sealed the remaining medicinal effects of the heaven-changing pill into the latter's body. It might come in handy one day. Their destination was the south of the Xia Kingdom. This year, Ning Chen was the swordsman of Prince Yan and was responsible for carrying his sword. Prince Yan wanted to go to the south of the Great Xia. The reason was simple. In the vast empire, this was the only place he had not been to. Furthermore, it was time to settle a grudge from the past. Ning Chen did not express any opinion. Ever since he woke up, he rarely spoke. Prince Yan did not try to persuade him, nor did he care. In his eyes, any words of encouragement were useless. If he could not overcome the hurdle in his heart, no one would be able to persuade him. The road to the south was very long and long. The two walked very slowly, step by step, as if they were sightseeing. The heavens gave you a pair of eyes, not just to let you look at the ground beneath your feet, Prince Yan said calmly as he walked in front and looked at the scenery. Ning Chen raised his head and looked at Ming Chuan in front of him. Then, he fixed his gaze on Prince Yan and said unhappily, "Thank you for your advice, senior. However, Ning Chen is not in the mood to appreciate it. I am not trying to enlighten you. I am just telling you that if you keep your head down like this, you will always see the ground beneath your feet. However, your eyes can see much more than this." "I understand." Ning Chen nodded and said respectfully. For the rest of the journey, Ning Chen no longer kept his head down. Instead, he looked forward. Even if he was not in the mood to appreciate it, he silently imprinted the scenery in front of him into his eyes. Prince Yan knew that Ning Chen was not someone who was easily influenced by the outside world. However, after seeing more, he would slowly change. Half a month later, the two arrived at the south of the Xia Kingdom. Unlike the north, the weather here was relatively warm. Even in the 12th month of winter, there was no bone-chilling cold. After arriving here, the pain in Ning Chen's legs lessened significantly. This was perhaps the only thing worth being happy about. There was a Prince Yu in the south. He was the 7th brother of Prince Yan and also the youngest of Emperor Xia's 4 surviving brothers. However, he was also the one who had been sent the furthest away. It was not that Prince Yu had done anything wrong. In fact, during the battle for the throne, Prince Yu was still immature. However, Prince Yu's mother had offended the current Emperor Xia too much. Prince Yu was simply implicated. After arriving here, Prince Yan was not in a hurry to see his youngest brother. They had not seen each other for nearly 20 years. Even their memories had become blurry. First, he wanted to go to the barbarian dynasty to see someone and settle a grudge. The barbarian dynasty was close to the south. It was a dynasty about the same size as the true extreme country. The current barbarian king was a powerful cultivator who was infinitely close to the Xiantian realm. When he was still the crown prince, he had hidden his identity and infiltrated the Xia kingdom. He had fought with Prince Yan, who had also not yet been crowned king. At that time, the 3rd prince of the Xia kingdom had already shown his talent in martial arts. He was known as the crown prince of the Xia kingdom. This made Prince Yan very unhappy. The two of them fought outside the palace. This matter shocked the entire world. Only then did they know that there was someone in the younger generation who could be mentioned in the same breath as the 3rd prince of the Xia kingdom. The northern Yen and the southern barbarians were spread throughout the world after that battle. The two of them had agreed to fight again when they reached the Xiantian realm. Now, Prince Yen could take that step at any time. Barbarian King did not hold back either. He had been at the peak of the acquired realm for many years, waiting for the opportunity to break through. Ning Chen had only heard about the previous generation's incident. However, in his opinion, Prince Yen would not lose. After the battle in Sword City, Ning Chen realized that although they were both at the peak of the acquired realm, the difference in strength between them was like heaven and earth. People as strong as Son of God and Prince Yen could even fight with Mu Chengxue, who had just reached the Xiantian realm. He still could not understand what kind of realm this was. However, he knew that the Xiantian realm was a natural moat that separated the heavens and the earth. The Xiantian realm was also known as the Heavenly Man. They could communicate with the power of heaven and earth. This was something that acquired realm masters could not compare to. However, there were very few people who could break through this uncrossable natural moat and fight Xiantian realm masters with their peak acquired realm cultivation. There had been such people in the past, today, and in the future. No matter how strong Barbarian King was, he could not be stronger than Prince Yen, who could already fight Xiantian realm masters. At least, that was what Ning Chen thought. The Barbarian King Palace was only a 2-day journey from the southern border. Prince Yen led Ning Chen from outside the Barbarian King Palace and fought their way into the Barbarian King Palace. Everywhere they passed, there were no casualties. In fact, Prince Yen was not a person who liked to kill. The former crown prince of the Barbarian King was now sitting on the throne. His youthfulness was gone, replaced by endless majesty. "You're old," Prince Yen said calmly. "You haven't changed," Barbarian King sighed. "Return to your original appearance. It's only been 20 years. It's nothing to the current legend of the Xia Kingdom." Prince Yen smiled faintly. His appearance changed instantly, and he returned to his youthful appearance from 10 years ago. "This is the third prince that I know. He's both civil and military. He's arrogant and unruly." As he spoke, Barbarian King slowly stood up. At this moment, the color of the sky changed. A heavy aura like that of a prehistoric beast quickly awakened, causing the space to distort. "Ning Chen, step back." Prince Yan's expression became serious as he said in a low voice. "Okay," Ning Chen nodded. He immediately put down the sword rack, turned his wheelchair, and walked away. "Aw man, go and greet the guests." The Barbarian King also said something to a pretty girl below the palace. "Yes," the girl nodded. In the next moment, a man walked forward and pushed Ning Chen away silently from the battlefield between the two. She knew that her father had been waiting for this battle for a long time. As the two of them walked away, the battle began. Prince Yen moved his hand. On the ground, the Zhiga sword flew from the rack and into his hand. At the same time, Barbarian King stomped his feet and immediately flew out like a cannonball. He suddenly punched towards Prince Yen. Boom! The sword and the fist collided. In the end, the fist suppressed the sword. Prince Yen retreated half a step. For the first time, a drop of blood fell from the corner of his mouth. Ning Chen was shocked. Prince Yen, who had not been injured when facing Mu Chengxue and the God's Son, was injured in the first move. This Barbarian King's strength was too terrifying. He could definitely be called unparalleled in the world. "I haven't seen you for 20 years. Your progress is not as great as mine." Barbarian King laughed wildly. He jumped up and suddenly stomped his foot. Prince Yen frowned. He moved his left hand. With a swoosh, the blue ancient sword flew out. He waved his hand and a wave of water filled the sky. Immediately, the Zhiga sword moved again and met Barbarian King's big foot head-on. Bang! Barbarian King's big foot broke through the water barrier and crashed into the Zhiga sword. A powerful shock wave spread out. The clothes of the two people fluttered. Prince Yen used his two swords to disperse Barbarian King's divine power and finally managed to block the latter's attack. It wasn't until this moment that the two of them were once again on the same starting line. Their moves started again, and the rumbling sounds were endless, showing how fierce the confrontation between the two of them was. Beside Ning Chen, Man's pretty face flashed with surprise. This was the first time she saw someone who could directly block her father's strength. Although it was a bit of a trick, he still managed to block it. Is this the legend of the Xia Kingdom? Man's voice was very pleasant to hear. It was clear and melodious. She did not have the shyness of a girl from the Central Plains. Instead, she had the unique straightforwardness of the barbarians. Ning Chen nodded. Without a doubt, Prince Yan was the legend of the Xia Kingdom. Perhaps Yin Ma Xiao, the eldest prince, Xia Miaoyu, and the others of the younger generation had already grown up. However, compared to Prince Yan, they still could not be mentioned in the same breath. Are you his disciple? Man continued to ask. Ning Chen shook his head and replied, No, I'm just a sword attendant. The shock on Wild's face grew even stronger. Such a powerful person was just a sword attendant. She felt a dangerous aura from Ning Chen. The barbarians had the sharpest senses. This meant that Ning Chen's strength definitely surpassed hers. In the barbarian dynasty, the strongest person was her father. Perhaps there were others who were stronger than Ning Chen, but there were not many of them. Especially among the younger generation, there were very few. Can you take me to the Central Plains to have a look? Man asked softly. Now she was even more curious about the mysterious Central Plains. What kind of divine land could nurture so many strong cultivators? Hearing this, Ning Chen unconsciously frowned. He was not used to Man's way of speaking. They had just met. In fact, they could not even be considered as acquaintances. Shouldn't this kind of request be made by people who were familiar with each other? However, this was only the beginning. In the next moment, Man's next sentence made Ning Chen completely speechless. If you agree, I can marry you. Chapter 60. Ning Chen knew that most of the girls of the barbarian dynasty were straightforward. They spoke whatever they thought without hesitation or faking it. They didn't feel anything when they heard it from others and would even look at it with admiration. However, once it happened to him, it made him feel uncomfortable. Miss Athaman, just call me Athaman, Athaman. Ning Chen called out while a wisp of a complicated expression flashed through his eyes. She was a good girl, a very good girl. Unfortunately, they shouldn't have any interactions. Do you have someone you like? Ning Chen asked softly. Athaman shook her head gently. I don't. Ning Chen laughed bitterly. Once you have someone you like, you'll understand how childish your words are today. You don't agree? Athaman didn't understand the meaning behind Ning Chen's words, but she understood the rejection in his words. She couldn't help but frown. Why? There's no reason. If there's really a reason, then it's that you don't like me, and I don't like you. Ning Chen was surprisingly patient as he explained. Why don't you like me? Athaman frowned even more. Could it be that I'm ugly? Ning Chen didn't know how to answer. If he didn't like her, then he didn't like her. There was no reason for it. However, he didn't want to hurt this pure and straightforward girl, so he thought for a moment before replying with a question. Then do you like me? Athaman thought for a moment before she said, I don't know, but I know that I don't hate you. Ning Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He continued patiently, Athaman, don't you want to understand the Central Plains? Then let me tell you something. In the Central Plains, only people who like each other can talk about marriage. Just not hating each other isn't enough. Is that so? Athaman nodded while seeming to be deep in thought. Then I'll work hard to like you and marry you. Then you'll take me to the Central Plains. Ning Chen laughed bitterly, but he didn't reply. If it was so easy to like someone, then he would have tried it a long time ago and wouldn't have to suffer as much as he did right now. Boom! Just as the two of them were talking, heaven and earth shook violently again. The battle in the main hall had reached its climax. Prince Yen combined his two swords and barely managed to fight to a draw with the barbarian king's divine power. Every move he made was 70% defensive and 30% offensive. The battle made heaven and earth miserable and chaotic. Many of the pillars in the main hall had already been destroyed. Some were shattered by the barbarian king's punches and kicks, and some were slashed by the Yen king's sword chi. Gravel flew everywhere and fell to the ground. The barbarian king was too powerful to the point of being inconceivable. His divine strength could shake mountains and split rocks. He was invincible and terrifying to the extreme. Using his unparalleled control of the sword, Prince Yen rotated his two swords and blocked one move with two moves. Only then was he able to block this terrifying divine power. Compared to 20 years ago, the barbarian king had indeed made great progress. Especially his divine power, it was simply heaven-defying. The thick earth energy in the Jiga sword had little effect on the barbarian king. Under his divine power, that little increase in gravity had almost no effect. Therefore, Yen Imperial Prince's battle was extremely difficult. It was even more difficult than when he faced Mu Qingxue and God's Child alone. Yen Imperial Prince, you will definitely lose today's battle. The barbarian king was like a demon. The more he fought, the braver he became. The more he fought, the crazier he became. His punches and kicks caused the void to explode and tremble unceasingly. Crack! Suddenly, a soft sound was heard. The blue ancient sword in Yen Imperial Prince's hand couldn't withstand the huge force and a fine crack appeared. Huh! The barbarian king laughed wildly. He channeled another 30% of his divine power into his fist. Soon after, a bang was heard. The ancient sword broke and half of the sword flew out. Yen Imperial Prince frowned. His expression gradually turned cold. He blocked the attack with his Jiga sword and took advantage of the momentum to retreat 10 meters away. The half of the sword that flew out fell to the ground. A touch of sadness flashed through Yen Imperial Prince's eyes. Although this blue ancient sword wasn't the strongest among the four swords, it had been with him the longest. It had also witnessed his lifetime of honor and disgrace. He didn't expect that it would be the first to leave today. With a wave of his hand, the broken ancient sword disappeared along with the half of the sword on the ground. With two clangs, they returned to the sword rack one after another. After the broken sword returned to its scabbard, Yen Imperial Prince's left hand grasped the void again. The green sword flew out and returned to his hand. The bone-piercing chill instantly filled the entire main hall. Again! His voice suddenly became colder. Yen Imperial Prince's body moved and instantly pressed forward. At the same time, the Jiga sword in his hand changed from defense to offense. The barbarian king received the attack. His divine power shook the heavy sword. Suddenly, he felt that the satisfaction that was within his reach disappeared. The sword turned upon contact. It didn't connect and didn't stop. In the next moment, the green sword was about to take his life. It was as fast as a swan. It was so fast that it disappeared in the blink of an eye. It was so fast that he died in the blink of an eye. The barbarian king's expression was serious. He took a step back for the first time. His divine power was restrained and he couldn't use it. However, the barbarian king was the barbarian king after all. 20 years ago, he was on par with Yen Imperial Prince. How could he be at a disadvantage so easily? The barbarian king who retreated was startled by the green sword. He immediately grabbed the Jiga sword that came after him. The Jiga sword was restrained. Yen Imperial Prince retreated to the side of the sword rack in an instant. He pulled out the red sword and turned to the front of the barbarian king again. The green and red sword moved at the same time. The two swords approached him. The barbarian king squinted his eyes. He grabbed the Jiga sword and smashed it down like an iron rod. However, the two swords changed direction again. It was difficult to reach him. After switching to the red sword, Yan Imperial Prince's speed increased by 30%. The two swords moved side by side. The speed of the sword overpowered the divine power. The barbarian king quickly lost his balance and showed signs of defeat. 20 years, I've waited for this day for 20 years. How can I lose? The barbarian king couldn't suppress his anger. The aura around him soared to the sky. The terrifying celestial phenomenon shocked the entire southern land. Even the northern border of the Xia kingdom could see it clearly. The seventh Xiantian. In an instant, countless people looked over. They were shocked by the sudden change. There was no mistake. That was indeed the aura of an Xiantian. It was powerful, shocking, and suppressed everything. It's the powerful barbarian king from the barbarian dynasty. After 20 years, I didn't expect that the southern barbarian king would be the first to reach the Xiantian realm. What about Yan Imperial Prince from the Xia kingdom? Why hasn't he broken through yet? It's not that easy to break through to the Xiantian realm. 2 Xiantian realm experts appeared in just 1 year. This is something that hasn't happened in the past 100 years. Although Yan Imperial Prince is amazing, he is indeed a big step behind the barbarian king this time. Unfortunately, from now on, the title of Northern Yan and Southern Barbarian will only exist in name. Not necessarily. Legend has it that Yan Imperial Prince from the Xia kingdom already has the strength to fight against Xiantian realm experts. The barbarian king has just broken through. It's still unknown who is stronger. Xiantian realm experts are Xiantian realm experts after all. No matter how strong the Hotian realm experts are, they can at most be on par with or have the strength to fight against them. They can never surpass them. No matter what, Yan Imperial Prince has been left far behind by the barbarian king. In just a few breaths' time, the experts in the world were all moved by the barbarian king's breakthrough to the Xiantian realm. Among the people of the same generation, the barbarian king and Yan Imperial Prince were the best. No one expected that the barbarian king would be the one to take the lead. In the palace of the barbarian dynasty, Yan Imperial Prince stood 30 feet in front of the barbarian king. He quietly watched the latter break through, but had no intention of interrupting him. Although he had the opportunity and ability to do so. There would be 3 calamities and 5 tribulations when breaking through to the Xiantian realm. The first tribulation, the heavenly demon tribulation, would come the moment one broke through. This was a test of one's state of mind. However, the barbarian king's mind was as firm as steel. This tribulation had no effect on him. It could be said that the people of the barbarian dynasty had a natural advantage when facing the heavenly demon tribulation. They were real, firm, and not fake. It had to be said that the barbarian king's strength was admirable, but at the same time, Yan Imperial Prince's integrity was also respectable. On the other side of the palace, a man looked at Yan Imperial Prince for a moment, then turned to look at Ning Chen and said, "He's a good person." Yes. Ning Chen nodded. Although their fighting philosophy was different, this did not stop him from admiring Yan Imperial Prince's personality. The legend of the Xia kingdom was worthy of this name no matter when, where, and under any circumstances. But my father is the strongest. Ah, man continued. The princess of the barbarian dynasty was like an ordinary little girl who worshipped her father. In her eyes, her father was the strongest. Ning Chen did not respond. He did not know if the barbarian king was the strongest, but he knew that if the person standing opposite him was him, he would definitely shoot an arrow through the heart without hesitation. Therefore, Yan Imperial Prince could become the legend of the Chu dynasty, but he could not. After a few breaths, the barbarian king's realm finally stabilized. Looking at Yan Imperial Prince in front of him, a complicated look flashed across his eyes. There was hostility, but also admiration. They were lifelong rivals, but also people who respected each other the most. If not for their different standpoints, they would be best friends. Again. As he spoke, the barbarian king took a step forward. The palace rumbled and shook. The power of the Xiantian stage was undeniable. Yan Imperial Prince's expression hardened. He waved his green and red swords. Two rays of light entered the ground and suppressed the shaking ground. In the next moment, the barbarian king's body flashed. He stepped over the barrier and punched. Yen Imperial Prince's eyes narrowed. He took a step back and instantly moved 10 feet away. Boom, boom, boom. In the violent shaking, a huge gully appeared between the two of them. The floor of the palace instantly cracked and flew everywhere. After the barbarian king broke through, his already terrifying divine power increased again. He was so strong that it was frightening. Just the strength of his physical body, without using any vital energy, was already so strong. It seemed that the battle between the two of them was gradually coming to an end. Yen Imperial Prince's green and red swords' overwhelming speed advantage was no longer so absolute because of the barbarian king's breakthrough. In addition to the barbarian king's skyrocketing divine power, there was not much suspense in this battle. As the saying goes, one strong person can defeat 10 skilled people. When one's strength reaches a certain level, it can suppress all moves. And the barbarian king, who had broken through to the Xiantian stage, had increased his strength to an unprecedented level. No matter how fast Yen Imperial Prince was, he was not so fast that he could not use any moves. Therefore, the battle was basically over. What a pity. I originally wanted to enjoy the pleasure of the battle a little longer. It seems that I can't. The barbarian king could feel the power still flowing out of his body. He could not help but sigh softly, slightly disappointed. The swords in Yen Imperial Prince's hands turned. The green and red swords immediately disappeared, turning into flowing light and entering the sword rack. You will enjoy it. As he spoke, Yen Imperial Prince walked to the sword rack. His right hand grasped the ancient sword hidden in the deepest part of the rack, and then he slowly pulled it out. Chapter 61. It was a black sword, even darker than Ning Chen's ink sword. It was as dark as the night, and no light could be seen. The moment the sword was unsheathed, Prince Yan's aura changed. It kept rising, surpassing the post-liminary stage and the half-connate stage. However, there was still no sign of him breaking through to the connate stage. The barbarian king looked at the sword in Prince Yan's hand. After a long time, his pupils shrank as if he had thought of something. This was the sealing sword, Abyss Condensation. For thousands of years, countless swordsmen had been searching for this ancient sword. Unexpectedly, it had fallen into Prince Yan's hands. Abyss Condensation was as strong as its name. When you stared into the abyss, you couldn't see what was inside. It was so deep that you couldn't see the bottom. So you've already reached the connate stage. The barbarian king was shocked as he felt the increasing pressure from Prince Yen. Without a doubt, this was the aura of the connate stage. Now it seemed that Prince Yen had sealed part of his power in Abyss Condensation a long time ago. With Abyss Condensation, even if he broke through to the connate stage, heaven and earth wouldn't be able to sense it. Everyone in the world knew that Grand Xia was a legend of the current generation, the crown prince of Grand Xia. He was extremely powerful, yet in the end, they still underestimated him. The sixth person in the world to step into the Xiantian realm wasn't Mu Qingxue of Sword City, but rather, it was the supreme genius of Grand Xia. Come. Prince Yen took a step forward. His expression was as calm as water as he said slowly. Unfortunately, he didn't plan to use this sword. Prince Yen gathered all his power and his aura surged. The pressure caused the space to wail. This was because he had just recovered his power. After familiarizing himself with it, he could control it freely. At the next moment, the abyss sword moved and the sky darkened. In an instant, time and space seemed to have been swallowed up. Prince Yen appeared before the barbarian king and slashed out the first and last sword attack with ease. Boom! The barbarian king blocked and punched back. However, at the moment of contact, he felt his aura leak. His divine power seemed to have fallen into the abyss and he was sent flying. The stone pillars in the main hall couldn't withstand the huge force. Several of them collapsed and fell to the ground. Prince Yen held his sword and stood in place. He didn't follow up with another attack. The battle had already ended. The barbarian king had just broken through and his cultivation wasn't stable yet. He couldn't resist the abyss condensation. I lost. Amidst the mess, the barbarian king struggled to get up. The corners of his lips were dyed red, and his expression was somewhat dejected. He didn't expect that he would be defeated so quickly. He had lost. He had lost his first battle after stepping into the Xiantian realm. Prince Yen didn't say anything, nor did he console him. He turned around and walked to the sword rack. Then, he slowly inserted the abyss in his hand. At the same time, Prince Yen quickly withdrew his aura and returned to the peak of the acquired realm. The barbarian king was not an ordinary person. He was someone who could let go of things easily. After a short period of dejection, he recovered his original free and easy spirit and asked the two of them to stay for a few days. Prince Yen did not object. He had just gone through a great battle and needed time to adjust. He was not in a hurry to leave. Ning Chen was extremely shocked. After witnessing the battle between the two absolute geniuses from the peak of the Hotian realm to the Xiantian realm, he finally realized how weak he was. Indeed, a person's eyes needed to look ahead, because the world ahead was too big. Over the next few days, the two of them settled down. Every day, Wild would go to their residence and earnestly fulfill her promise. She had said that she would do her best to like Ning Chen, so she had to keep her word. At first, Ning Chen didn't feel anything. Later, he felt a little unnatural and began to urge Prince Yen to leave. "What are you afraid of?" Prince Yen left this sentence and immediately walked out of the courtyard to attend the barbarian king's banquet. Ning Chen was afraid. He was afraid that this stubborn girl would really do what she said. He was even more afraid that his heart would soften. He didn't want to hurt her. She was a good girl. Therefore, he could only urge Prince Yen to leave before Wild did what she said. Prince Yen didn't seem to see this and ignored it. This made Ning Chen more and more worried. Finally, one day, what he was worried about happened. The day before the two of them were about to leave, Wild went to the palace and told the barbarian king that she was going to marry Ning Chen. The barbarian king looked at his daughter. He didn't persuade her or stop her. He only asked, "Do you like him?" "Yes." Wild nodded and said affirmatively. The barbarian king didn't ask anything else. He directly sent someone to invite Prince Yen to explain his position and opinion. Prince Yen frowned and said, "I can't make the decision." Ning Chen was only his sword attendant, not his servant. Other than carrying a sword on his back, he couldn't make any decisions for him. "Then I'll ask the person who can make the decision to say something." The barbarian king said simply and roughly. Prince Yen thought for a moment, then nodded and agreed to this matter. This day, a letter flew out of the palace of the barbarian dynasty and headed straight for the imperial city of Great Xia. Although he couldn't make the decision, there was one person who could. That was Zhang Sun in the Weiyang Palace. He knew that the relationship between Ning Chen and Zhang Sun wasn't as simple as master and servant. Zhang Sun would never mention an ordinary eunuch to him. Because they had to wait for the reply, their journey was delayed again. Ning Chen only knew that Wild went to the palace, but he didn't know what the barbarian king and Prince Yen talked about. He only felt more and more uneasy. Wild hadn't appeared for several days. This was very unusual. He didn't know that in the barbarian dynasty, girls who were about to get married couldn't go out. Half a month later, the reply from the imperial palace of Great Xia finally arrived. There were 2 letters in total. One was for the barbarian king and Prince Yen. The content was very simple. Zhang Sun agreed to the marriage on behalf of Ning Chen. As for the other letter, it was naturally for Ning Chen. Ning Chen didn't know about the other letter, but after seeing the letter in his hand, he finally knew where the strong uneasiness in his heart came from. In this world, if there was one person's orders he didn't dare to disobey, it was Zhang Sun. Zhang Sun was angry in the letter. It was very direct and very strict, forbidding him from resisting the marriage. If Zhang Sun had used her identity as the empress to pressure him, Ning Chen might have had the intention to fight back. However, Zhang Sun's entire letter was scolding him as an elder. He didn't even have the courage to fight back. It was because Zhang Sun didn't use her status to pressure him that brought him unparalleled pressure. In Ning Chen's heart, Zhang Sun had a very special place. After he came to this world, it was Zhang Sun who brought him back to Weiyang Palace and protected him from the wind and rain outside many times. Otherwise, he would have died long ago. He owed Zhang Sun a debt of support and protection. This debt of gratitude was as heavy as a mountain. So once Zhang Sun was angry, he didn't dare to talk back. He didn't dare to oppose, but he also couldn't really agree to this marriage. This made Ning Chen feel very irritated, unusually irritated. Zhang Sun's interference was the thing he least expected. He had even guessed that Prince Yan might interfere, but he didn't take it to heart. He was a sword attendant. He was only responsible for carrying the sword. He had no obligation to accept other arrangements. Did you tell the Empress this? Ning Chen barged into Prince Yan's room. This was the first time he was angry. There were only the two of them here. If he didn't tell Zhang Sun, then it naturally had to be Prince Yan. Yes. Prince Yan nodded. He had no intention of denying it. I want to challenge you. Ning Chen's chest felt heavy. He was so angry that he lost his mind. He pulled out his ink sword with a clang and said recklessly. All right. Prince Yan agreed. He stood up and walked outside. Ning Chen didn't think he could win. He just wanted to give Prince Yan a beating. As for whether or not he could beat him, that was another matter. Reality was just like that. There was no suspense in the battle. Ning Chen lost, and lost miserably. Even his face was disfigured. He was slapped into the ground by Prince Yan. Ning Chen was dejected. He crawled up and sat on the ground. His heart was in a mess. He didn't know what to do. You hate that girl? Prince Yan frowned and asked. Ning Chen smiled bitterly as he shook his head. He had never hated a man, and it was the same even today when he was forced into a corner. But Man had a stubborn personality. Once she set her mind on something, she would definitely do it. She was simple and direct, but also very troublesome. Then try to accept her, said Prince Yan indifferently. You make it sound so easy. Why don't you accept her? Ning Chen's anger rose again. Was it so easy to accept someone? At most, he and Man could only be friends. They couldn't go any further, let alone talk about marriage. Up to you. If you want to refuse, you can talk to Wuyo yourself. Prince Yan threw down this sentence, then turned and returned to his room. Ning Chen was so angry that he couldn't speak. If Zhang Sun was so easy to talk to, he wouldn't be in such a difficult position. They had known each other for so long, but when had he ever persuaded Zhang Sun? Even leaving the palace was his own decision. He had knelt for 3 days, and Zhang Sun had almost smashed him to death with a teacup. In reality, Zhang Sun was the most difficult person to talk to in this world. Once he decided on something, he would never change his mind. Ning Chen was a bit resentful that Zhang Sun had randomly set up a matchmaker. This was forcing him to run away again. But when he thought of the person in the room, he immediately gave up on the idea of running away. With that person there, it was impossible to run away. Moreover, he had a criminal record. Zhang Sun had definitely warned Prince Yan to be on guard against him running away again. If you agree, then go marry her. Why force me? Ning Chen was so angry that he couldn't do this. He couldn't do that. The one who tied the bell should untie it. Ning Chen had no other choice. He could only sit in his wheelchair and go to the princess's courtyard where Ah Man lived. Ah Man was the princess of the barbarian dynasty. Her status was noble. How could she marry someone like him who couldn't even stand up? What was going on in this girl's head? Ning Chen's distress was partly due to the pressure from Zhang Sun, and partly because he didn't want to hurt Ah Man. In reality, directly rejecting this inexplicable marriage was the most straightforward choice. But this was too cruel to Ah Man, who had just turned 17. Especially since Ah Man was a princess. This was equivalent to slapping Ah Man's face in front of everyone. This was something he couldn't accept. He could ignore people he didn't care about. He could even ruthlessly stomp on people he hated. But Ah Man wasn't one of those two types of people. He couldn't be so heartless. Thinking about this, Ning Chen arrived in front of Ah Man's courtyard. Just as he was about to enter, he was stopped by a pretty maid wearing the palace robes of the barbarian race. "Young master, you can't go in. You'll break the rules." "What rules?" Ning Chen frowned slightly. He hadn't heard of these rules when he came a few days ago. Could it be that in just a few days, the barbarian king palace had added new rules? The maid knew that the person in front of her was from the Central Plains and might not know the rules of the barbarian dynasty. She patiently explained, "Young master, you don't know. In the barbarian dynasty, whether it's a commoner or a princess, they can't go out before they're married. Naturally, they can't meet people casually." Ning Chen was shocked and his heart was in a mess. Could it be that Zhang Sun had already agreed on his behalf? Why didn't anyone mention it to him? Chapter 62. Ning Chen was both shocked and infuriated. But at the same time, he felt even more helpless. If it was anyone else, he would have thrown them off without hesitation. Only Zhang Sun was an exception. It was just like an elder deciding a marriage for a junior without permission. Other than being angry and helpless, what else could the junior do? If an elder was wrong, then it was an elder's fault. If she thought it was right, then it was right. In Changsuan's eyes, deciding on his marriage was only natural. He didn't think it was inappropriate. In fact, it was inevitable. Zhang Sun was his only elder in this world. In the future, when he married, he would definitely have to get her approval. However, no matter what, he still hoped that when Zhang Sun decided on his marriage for him, she would inform him in advance. She didn't want to decide everything just because she was an elder, right? Changsuan's domineering attitude had already become a habit. Beneath her gentle and virtuous appearance was a domineering heart. He had long since seen through that, so he had always been a bit afraid of her. However, it was precisely because of that domineeringness that Zhang Sun would ignore even the Xia Emperor's attitude and protect him time and time again. Zhang Sun was already unrivaled. Whatever she thought was right, no one could compare to her in this aspect. He didn't dare resist, nor could he change Changsuan's mind. He could only try to change Wild's mind. Furthermore, he had to resolve this matter as quickly as possible. Right now, the only people who knew about this matter were only a few people in the barbarian king palace. There was still time to back out. Once this matter spread, it would become extremely troublesome. Although the barbarian dynasty wasn't large and couldn't compare to the Grand Xia, it was still an independent dynasty. As a princess, Wild's dignity was above all else. Marriage was a matter between two people. Breaking off the marriage was something that only one person could do. Someone had to be slapped in the face. He was thick-skinned and didn't care. Outside the monastery, a maid blocked the way. Ning Chen couldn't enter, but he had to. "I have an important matter to discuss with your princess. Please move aside." Ning Chen turned his wheelchair, wanting to force his way into the palace. "Master, you really can't go in." The maid was a bit anxious. She blocked Ning Chen, refusing to let him in. "Hongzhu, let him in." Just at this moment, a pleasant voice rang out from within the monastery. It was clear and melodious without the slightest impurity. "Yes, princess." Hongzhu bowed and respectfully said. Then, she turned around and no longer blocked her path. Ning Chen turned his wheelchair and entered. He pushed open the door to the room in the middle and saw a pretty girl sitting at the table. On the table, a red wedding dress was lying there quietly. The girl was carefully embroidering each peony flower on the dress. I heard that before a woman from the Central Plains gets married, she has to embroider her own wedding dress so that she can live a happy life. A man did not raise her head to look at Ning Chen. She was still focused on the embroidery in her hands. She had just started learning and was not very familiar with it. The peony flower was beautiful, blooming as brilliantly as blood. The heart of the flower still hadn't completely dried up. The girl's fingers were slightly red, but she was still embroidering without a trace of distraction. Ning Chen's heart ached. He couldn't bear to see her like this, but it was also cruel. In the end, he made his decision and said, "Princess, we're not suited for each other." A man raised her head, and a wisp of surprise appeared on her pretty face as she asked, "You're unwilling to marry me?" "Yes." Ning Chen nodded with a heavy heart. He really couldn't lie to this kind girl anymore. A man put down the red wedding dress in her hands and stood up. Then she said, "I'll go tell my father to cancel the engagement." She spoke without any hesitation and without any anger or dissatisfaction. It was just a simple notification. A man's straightforwardness surprised Ning Chen, but after the surprise, he felt even more heartache. He knew that he had hurt this sincere girl. He was never willing to owe anyone anything in his life, but he owed a man a favor that could never be repaid. A man stood up and walked out of the room. When she passed by Ning Chen, she stopped and said softly, "You asked me before if I liked you. At that time, I didn't know, but now I know. I like you." She couldn't make things difficult for him. If he wasn't willing, then she wouldn't marry him. Sigh. Ning Chen's heart ached. He was in so much pain that he couldn't speak. Why did fate always play with people like this? The red wedding dress on the table was lifted slightly by a breeze, and a faint fishy smell wafted over. Barbarian girls were never good at needlework, and barbarian princesses were the same. How could every woman from the Central Plains embroider her own wedding dress? The peony bloomed in the breeze. It was as beautiful as blood. You could see that every needle of embroidery was painful for you. You could see that the peony bloomed for a lifetime and someone was waiting for you. She would eventually find the person who was willing to be painful for her and wait for her. They were not fated to be together in this life. They only hoped that they wouldn't meet in the next life. Ning Chen left and closed the door. The floating wedding dress also slowly fell down. On this day, a man went to see the king of barbarians and asked to cancel the engagement. The king of barbarians was shocked and then furious. The monarch's order was like a mountain. How could it be changed so easily? However, a man stubbornly insisted. No one could change her mind, not even the king of barbarians. The king of barbarians was helpless. Looking at his favorite daughter, he had to compromise in the end. It was impossible to cancel the engagement. Although this matter was not announced to the world, there were still a few people who knew about it. He couldn't slap his own face. He just agreed to postpone the wedding date. Even though this delay was an indefinite amount of time. The king of barbarians didn't know what bewitching potion Ning Chen had given his daughter to make a man compromise again and again. He was angry and unhappy. He still didn't like people from the Central Plains. A man was a pearl in the palace of the barbarian dynasty. She was deeply respected. Therefore, several maids in the palace who knew the inside story suddenly became unfriendly to Ning Chen and Prince Yan. Prince Yan just glanced at Ning Chen calmly and didn't say anything about the wedding date being postponed. Since it was a foregone conclusion, there was no need for them to stay. After simply writing a letter to inform Zhang Sun of the matter, they were ready to leave. The king of barbarians naturally didn't intend to keep them this time. Because of Ning Chen, he didn't treat Prince Yan well either. Before leaving, a man stopped Ning Chen in front of the door of the small courtyard. She asked seriously, "Are you willing to take me to the Central Plains?" Ning Chen was slightly stunned. Before he could answer, he heard a man speak again. She said with a trace of deeply concealed sadness, "As a friend." "Okay." Beside him, Prince Yen interjected indifferently and answered for Ning Chen. Then he walked away, leaving the two of them temporarily. Ning Chen sighed softly and nodded. He had no right to refuse. A smile appeared on Ah Man's face. It was clean and simple. That was all. The next moment, Ah Man took out the wedding dress from the bag behind her and said softly, "The wedding dress is ready. Can I wear it once for you to see?" This was her last wish before she left. From now on, they would be friends. Ning Chen was silent. He didn't refuse and silently turned to the side, leaving the room behind him to Ah Man. Ah Man entered the room and walked out soon. At this moment, the entire world seemed to have lost its color. There was only a touch of beautiful red. The wedding dress was as red as blood. The girl was as beautiful as a flower. It was a perfect match. The peony flower was beautiful, but it couldn't compare to the girl's beautiful smile. Soon, Ning Chen turned and left. Ah Man also took off the wedding dress and followed with a smile. The wedding dress was left in the room of the small courtyard. A drop of tear quietly fell from the wedding dress and disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the northern plains, warhorses neighed. The snow that had fallen intermittently for over 3 months had finally begun to melt. Winter had passed and spring had arrived. This meant that the war was about to begin. In the commander's tent, Fan Lingyue sat in front of a table and quietly read one report after another. He was still wearing the same light blue robe with various patterns embroidered on it. It was simple yet noble. The young general was called into the commander's tent and respectfully waited for the military advisor's orders. When will the third prince of the Grand Xia return to the imperial palace? Fan Lingyue looked at the report in his hand and asked without raising his head. Reporting to the military advisor, "It should still take 2 more days, the young general replied. Fan Lingyue frowned but didn't say anything. Although it was a little slow, it was still within expectations. The emperor of the Grand Xia was old and wouldn't live for too long. He needed to find someone to help him. The death of the 8th prince was the best reason for the other princes to return. Even the 3rd prince, who had been sent the furthest away by the Grand Xia emperor, would definitely seize the opportunity to rush back from the battlefield at the southeast border of the Grand Xia. Right now, the 1st prince and the 10th prince had already returned to the palace. They were only waiting for the 3rd prince, and the 4 princes would all be gathered. Send someone to assassinate him. However, only failure is allowed, not success, Fan Lingyue ordered. Yes. Although the young general didn't understand, he still respectfully accepted the order. The military advisor wouldn't be wrong. He only needed to follow the orders. After the young general left, Fan Lingyue finally couldn't help coughing violently. Traces of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth and dyed the letter in front of her red. Her body was getting worse and worse. She had to make the best use of her time. Assassinating the 3rd prince of the Grand Xia was the fastest way to ignite the conflict between the 3 princes. Putting aside the 1st prince for now, the conflict between the 3rd prince and the 10th prince had already become irreconcilable because of the 8th prince's death. No matter whether the 10th prince had the intention to assassinate the 3rd prince or not, this assassination attempt would be attributed to him. As long as the Grand Xia was no longer a monolithic entity, she would have many ways to slowly widen this rift until this invincible dynasty completely collapsed. Thinking of this, Fan Lingyue couldn't help but sigh softly. How good would it be if the heavens could give her another 10 years? She thought of Ning Chen. That youth was very similar to her. He looked kind but was actually extremely cold. He had deceived everyone in the world, including her. Unfortunately, although she had tried to kill him several times, she had failed in the end. After that incident in the Grand Xia Imperial City, it could be seen that the Empress of the Grand Xia protected him to the extreme. She actually personally escorted him out of the Imperial City, and even the Xia Emperor couldn't do anything about it. In the Grand Xia, that Empress's influence was unparalleled. She didn't even lose to the Xia Emperor. The bloodline of the eldest grandson even produced 2 marquises. Her background and strength were definitely not something that other nobles could compare to. For the Empress of the Grand Xia to insist on protecting someone, it was indeed a very troublesome matter. And now that Ning Chen had Prince Yen by his side, it would be even more difficult to make a move on him. The reason why she was so eager to kill him wasn't because there was a grudge between them. She just didn't like the existence of any variables. Moreover, this variable had a weapon that everyone was afraid of. She couldn't be sure that the thing that had turned the Zhengqi Palace upside down back then could be mass-produced. But, it was better to be safe than sorry. In her plan, she definitely couldn't allow anything to go beyond her control. Therefore, this Ning Chen definitely couldn't be left alive. She had to think of some way to pull him away from Prince Yan's side. Chapter 63. In Sword City, the cold moon was high up in the sky. Suddenly, a sword aura soared into the sky. In an instant, it cut open the entire world. At that moment, all the swordsmen in Sword City sensed it. Their faces were filled with shock. They knew that the Sword of Sword City was about to make its move. The Sword of Sword City was a legend in the hearts of all the swordsmen in the world. No one had ever seen that sword make its move. Just its existence alone was enough to suppress everyone. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the swords in the swordsmen's hands did not listen to their commands. They all flew into the sky and formed a path of swords to welcome the legend of the sword. It was an indescribable scene. The world was silent. Tens of thousands of swords were crawling and continuously humming. In the next moment, an edgeless sword appeared above the tens of thousands of swords. Without any hesitation, it flew towards the west with the tens of thousands of swords. Everyone in the world knew that the Sword of Sword City did not break through to the innate realm. However, that did not affect the power of that sword. In Sword City, the strongest was that sword. Even Mu Qingshue's existence could not change that fact. The innate realm was the only limit in the world. Only the Sword of Sword City, no matter what realm or cultivation it was nothing but a joke. In front of the legend of Sword City, everything was useless. Only the path of the sword was supreme. At that moment, everyone in the world could see that in the sky, tens of thousands of swords were paving the path. A sword was quickly flying towards the distance. It's here. In the first palace of the Eternal Night Divine Sect, the invincible martial monarch suddenly opened his eyes. He looked at the layers of obstacles and looked at the sword that was quickly approaching. He had agreed to that sword-proving battle. Today was the deadline. There were very few experts in the world who were qualified to have him prove his sword-proving battle. A qualified opponent was extremely important to that Sword of Sword City. Whoosh! In front of the first palace that was surrounded by the other palaces, a sword landed. White clothes, a cold face, and emotionless eyes were calmly looking forward, waiting for the opponent to appear. The martial monarch walked out with the divine halberd Tian Huang in his hand. He looked at the sword below with a trace of seriousness in his eyes. Please. Mu Bai said indifferently. The martial monarch walked forward. With a boom, his aura suddenly changed. A heavy pressure spread out, setting the start of the most intense battle. Clang, Mu Bai's body moved, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of the martial monarch. His hand didn't move, and his sword didn't move, but the sword aura around his body automatically condensed, attacking the latter. The martial monarch raised his halberd and waved it. The tens of thousands of sword energies were instantly shattered, along with Mu Bai who had already arrived in front of him. However, when the afterimage dissipated, Mu Bai was still in the same place. He hadn't moved from the beginning to the end. The swords of Sword City, wherever the intent was, the sword would also be there. There was no distance between the intent and the sword. This was also the reason why Sword City was so strong. No one could be faster, more accurate, and more powerful than Sword City's sword. The invincibility of martial lords was due to the tyranny of their martial arts, and even more so because of their special physique. Blades and swords were hard to injure, and even if they were injured, they would not die. In this world, there was no one capable of defeating a martial monarch, and even less capable of killing a martial monarch. This was the reason why the 5 strongest people and 1 sword in the world were all undefeated. A newly advanced innate ranker might already be as famous as them in terms of title, but his true strength was still far from theirs. Mu Bai did not cultivate any heavenly book. Even though the travel scroll in Mu Qingshue's hand was given by him, the speed of Sword City's sword was still unparalleled in the world. Even Mu Qingxue, who cultivated the travel scroll, could not compare. The martial monarch waved his halberd. With one move, he split the space between the two. With one halberd, he cut through the gap between Mu Bai and Mu Bai. Mu Bai couldn't do limitless, but his true qi was boundless, so Mu Bai couldn't do it. The sword moved again. It avoided the desolate sky blade and condensed into the strongest point. With a so sound, it pierced through the martial monarch's body. The martial monarch groaned, but his expression did not change. Instead, he took a step forward and waved his halberd. The world lost its color. Mu Bai's hand moved and the edgeless sword appeared. He blocked the halberd with his sword and stepped back. The corner of his mouth was dyed red. After one move, both of them were injured. They were evenly matched. The sword advanced, then became even faster. The halberd advanced, then became even stronger. Their sharpness could not be touched. In the domain of speed and power, both of them were invincible. One was fast, one was strong. They fought to the peak of martial arts. The longer they fought, the heavier the injuries on their bodies became. Their sword intent spread throughout the world. The halberd's shadow swept through the army. They were unrivaled. They could only be faster and stronger. The battle between the two lasted from the night of the moon to the dawn. The strongest martial monarch and the strongest swordsman fought until the earth shattered and everything collapsed. Outside of the eternal night first palace, countless palaces had already turned into ruins. The more they fought, the stronger the swordsman's sword intent. The more they fought, the stronger the martial monarch's aura became. Finally, when the first rays of the morning sun shone down, the swordsman's sword intent rose to the peak. The martial monarch's aura also reached the peak. Final move, sword of proof. Mu Bai's eyes moved. His sword pierced through the clouds and raised the tribulation of the 9 heavens. Final move, end the legend of Sword City. The martial monarch faced the attack. The desolate sky blade in his hand raised the heaven and earth. Wind and clouds crazily swirled and covered everything within. This halberd was going to destroy the heaven and earth. Neither man nor sword would exist. Boom! The sword and halberd collided, raising a violent storm that covered the sky. Around the two people, the mountains and rivers were affected. The earth continued to collapse. The might of the destruction of the heavens, the scene of the destruction of the world, shocked the surrounding 100 miles. Gradually, the aftermath dissipated. Mu Bai's edgeless was quietly stabbed into the martial monarch's chest. The sword went in an inch and blood spurted out. Ding! Suddenly, a sharp and clear sound rang out. The long sword broke. The swordsman frowned. Looking at the broken sword in his hand, he was a bit unhappy. I've lost. Mu Bai calmly said. The victor has not been decided. At most, it's a draw. The martial monarch pulled out the sword from his chest and shook his head. The sword is already broken. How can I prove my sword? This battle has already been decided. Mu Bai indifferently said. Boom. Just at that time, a strange phenomenon appeared in the sky. A white pillar of light rushed into the sky from the swordsman's body. The aura that shocked the world was the sign of breaking through to the innate realm. However, Mu Bai frowned. He glanced at the horizon and immediately waved the broken sword in his hand. In an instant, the strange phenomenon in the sky was broken. Noisy. The swordsman's impatient voice was still echoing. There was not the slightest hint of happiness. Little did he know that this was the realm that every martial artist in the world dreamed of reaching. At that moment, due to the appearance of the eighth innate realm, the world was in an uproar. However, before the crowd could even react, they saw an incomparably terrifying sword light cut through the sky. The sword shattered the strange phenomenon in the sky. Originally, there were still people guessing who this person who was about to enter the innate realm was. But with this sword, the answer was clear. In this world, the only swordsman who had such strength was the sword from Sword City. The only one who could look down on the heavens was also the sword from Sword City. The strange phenomenon collapsed. This time, the people of the world were even more confused. Could the sword from Sword City be considered to have entered the innate realm? She was very curious about everything, turning left and right to look at it. Ning Chen followed behind them. Seeing Ah Man's happy smile, his mood also improved. Because of the matter of breaking off the engagement, Man hadn't smiled happily for a long time. Many times, he could see Ah Man in a daze alone in a place with no one around. The sadness that occasionally appeared in her eyes made him feel very uncomfortable. Ah Man was originally a cheerful girl. She didn't hold grudges or act coy. She said whatever she wanted to say. But now, she had become somewhat sentimental and learned to hide her emotions. She was the princess of the barbarian dynasty. She should have lived every day happily. Wild's laughter seemed to have an indescribable power. Many people on the street smiled kindly at her. Everyone loved beauty. For such a beautiful girl to smile so beautifully, she was like a flower in the spring, causing people to feel relaxed and happy. She was pleasing to the eye. However, while some people appreciated flowers, others trampled on them. In this world, there would always be blind people who wanted to ruthlessly destroy this beauty. "Miss, our young master invites you." Two men dressed as guards walked over and blocked Ah Man's path. "I don't know your young master. You've got the wrong person." Ah Man was slightly surprised. "There's no mistake." "Miss, please," said the two guards coldly. Ah Man looked back at Ning Chen with some difficulty. She wasn't stupid. She could tell that these two people didn't come with good intentions. But this wasn't the barbarian dynasty. She didn't want to cause trouble for Ning Chen. Just as Ah Man was about to agree, a bone-chilling voice rang out from the youth behind her. "She won't go with you." At this moment, a man's pretty face broke into a smile, and her eyes glistened like limpid autumn waters. Chapter 64. Ah Man consciously walked behind Ning Chen, giving him the authority to handle this matter. He was the one who had brought her out, so he should protect her. Her father had said that no matter if it was the barbarian dynasty or the Central Plains, if something happened, a woman could never walk in front of a man. She did not understand before, but now she did. In front of Ah Man, Ning Chen's eyes were cold enough to freeze, causing the people on the street to unconsciously move aside. Just a moment ago, when this young man had been following behind the young girl, he had clearly been a good-natured youth with smiling eyes, quiet and warm. They did not expect that in just a short moment, a person could change so much. The two guards could also see that this youth was not simple, but as people of the Wuhou government, in this southern borders Tianfu City, they had nothing to fear. The two of them stepped forward, wanting to forcefully grab him. Ning Chen's eyes became even colder, the killing intent in his heart difficult to suppress. He had finally managed to get Ah Man to smile again, but now there were people who were blind enough to try and snatch her away. The Great Xia dynasty had been established for over 1,000 years, and the laws were strict. He did not expect that there would be such a thing as blocking people on the street and bullying people. "Miss, if you do not want your friend to be implicated, I advise you to come with us." One of the guards finally threatened. Ah Man shook her head, "I'm not going." A cold smile flashed across the guard's face. She really did not know the difference between life and death. The other guard did not say anything, directly reaching out to grab Ah Man behind Ning Chen. Shwa! The black light flashed and returned to its scabbard. Before anyone could react, they saw an arm fly out. Blood spurted out and splattered all over the ground. I already said that she will not go with you. Ning Chen's left hand tightly grabbed the guard's throat, allowing the latter's blood to splash onto his body. Then, he tightened his grip, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. The guard fiercely struggled, but was unable to move an inch. The expression of the guard beside him greatly changed, and he unsheathed his sword and slashed at Ning Chen. Humph! Ning Chen's eyes became cold, and his left hand pointed at the guard's sword. With a crack, the sword broke, and the guard flew away, blood spraying everywhere. Right at this moment, a man with a smile on his face slowly walked over. He wore an ice-blue satin robe, and his jet-black and dense hair was simply tied up with a jade hairpin. Beneath his dashing eyebrows was a pair of slender peach blossom eyes that were filled with a smile, and he looked peaceful and harmless. "Friend, can you be merciful? Forgive this disappointing guard of mine," said Ji Yuntang warmly to the youth in front of him. "They are your subordinates?" Ning Chen turned his head and asked. "Yes." Ji Yuntang nodded. "That won't do." With that, Ning Chen loosened his grip. The instant the guard's body went limp, Ning Chen formed a sword finger and pierced through the guard's chi. The guard's body was sent flying, his cultivation base crippled. Ji Yuntang narrowed his eyes and didn't even look at the guard who flew out. He said softly, "This one is Ji Yuntang. I have yet to ask for your name." Ning Chen frowned. He had heard of this name before. It was possible that there were people with the same name in this world. But in Tianfu City, there was only one person called Ji Yuntang. He was one of the 10 marquises of the current dynasty, Marquis Ji Yu's only son. He's called Ning Chen. Just as Ning Chen was frowning, Amon crisply interjected. She had heard that Ning Chen was very famous in the Grand Xia. Prince Yen had personally told her this. Prince Yen had said that Ning Chen had been a eunuch. He had beaten the empress's nephew, fought the true extreme emissary, and even bombed the imperial palace. Ning Chen was helpless. How could she reveal everything to her enemy so quickly? This girl's personality was too straightforward. In truth, he had never understood why Prince Yen was so indifferent to everyone. Even him, a sword attendant in name, didn't say much to him. Only Amon was an exception. It could be said that Prince Yen would grant Amon's every request. If Amon wanted to know about his past, Prince Yen would patiently tell her everything. He wouldn't hold back at all. Now, Amon basically knew all of his secrets. Even the matter of him being a fake eunuch had been dug out by her. The Empress's personal eunuch? As expected, as soon as he heard Ning Chen's name, Ji Yuntang immediately thought of his identity. And that was the only identity he could think of. Ning Chen was worried that Amon would let it slip again, so he spoke before she could. "Yes." A man muttered unhappily in a low voice after being snatched away from her. "You're the eunuch. Your whole family are eunuchs." Ning Chen heard it very clearly because he was the one who had taught her this. After hearing Ning Chen personally admit it, Ji Yuntang's expression immediately changed. He coldly laughed. He had thought that this person was some amazing person, but it turned out that he was just a eunuch by the Empress's side. He knew that this person was very famous, but no matter how famous he was still just a eunuch. To the side, Ning Chen calmly watched Ji Yuntang's expression change without saying anything. In truth, they were somewhat similar. They both liked to use smiles to disguise themselves. The only difference was that Ji Yuntang's patience was somewhat lacking. After knowing that his opponent's identity wasn't a threat to him, he immediately stopped pretending. "I want this girl," Ji Yuntang said domineeringly. These were the most direct, domineering, and also the most brainless words Ning Chen had heard in the past few days. "This young lady is mine." Ning Chen smiled brightly and replied in the same manner. Behind him, Amon immediately smiled like a flower. Although she knew that Ning Chen had said these words to infuriate this loathsome person, she was still very happy to hear them. "Since you don't know the difference between life and death, then let's see who's the real deal." As expected, Ji Yuntang was infuriated and couldn't hold back any longer. He took a step forward and raised his fist, smashing it towards Ning Chen's head. He was a fifth-rank martial artist. Taking care of a little eunuch was nothing to him. Seeing Ji Yuntang's suicidal actions, Amon unconsciously retreated 2 steps. She understood Ning Chen's personality, so she didn't want to get too close. Ning Chen turned his head. Seeing Amon hiding so far away, he couldn't help frowning. He softly said, "If Senior asks, you have to prove that I was forced to take action." Ever since he had been seriously injured last time, Prince Yen had forbidden him from casually taking action. He knew this was for his own good, so he had agreed. Sometimes, a man's promise was really troublesome. After Ning Chen finished speaking, he didn't wait for Amon's reply. He turned his head and looked at the fist in front of him. He clenched his right hand and immediately used force to break it. Immediately, there was a crisp crack. Broken bones broke and blood splattered everywhere. Ugh! The intense pain caused Ji Yuntang's face to immediately distort. However, before he could cry out in pain, he saw the sword in front of him and his mute point was instantly suppressed. After the fight, Ning Chen wiped the blood off his face and body. Then he looked at the clean man and finally understood why this girl had retreated just now. The girls of the barbarian dynasty were really smart. Amon was very happy. Even though she had been blocked and almost taken liberties. Now, she couldn't even stroll around the streets. However, she was still very happy. Thus, on the way back to Prince Yu's residence, Amon had a happy smile on her face. This made Ning Chen's displeasure disappear. Everything else was trivial. As long as Amon was happy, it was fine. Today's fight wasn't in vain. It was worth it. When they returned to Prince Yu's residence, Ning Chen was about to go back to change his clothes. Amon was also about to go back to rest. However, they met Prince Yen at the entrance of the residence. Prince Yen saw the happy Amon and Ning Chen covered in blood. He couldn't help but frown. "Did you fight?" Ning Chen nodded helplessly. "Someone took liberties with Amon. I had no choice." "They attacked first," a man added. Prince Yen nodded and didn't pursue the matter. He asked, "Your injury didn't relapse, right?" "No, the other party was weaker," Ning Chen replied. "That person is called Ji Yuntang," Amon added. Ning Chen was speechless again. "Miss, it wasn't easy to smooth over the fight. Can you not ruin it at this time?" Sure enough, Prince Yen frowned again when he heard this name. He seemed to have heard this name before. After thinking for a moment, he asked uncertainly, "Marquis Ji Yu's son?" "Yes," Ning Chen replied. Prince Yen thought for a moment and then said lightly, "If you fought, then so be it. I'll send someone to deliver medicine later." "Thank you, Senior," Ning Chen thanked him respectfully. However, Ji Yuntang's injury couldn't be cured with medicine. It took 100 days to recover from a serious injury, let alone a broken bone. Seeing that the two of them were fine, Prince Yen didn't say anything else. He turned and walked towards his room. Before turning, he paused and said calmly, "Don't fight again before your injury recovers." "Yes," Ning Chen replied. After Prince Yen left, Amon touched Ning Chen's arm and asked, "Is that Marquis Ji Yu powerful?" Ning Chen nodded. "Very powerful." "How powerful is he? Compared to you?" Amon asked curiously. Ning Chen was helpless. How could he compare? It was impossible. But since Amon asked, he could only answer, "He can beat 100 of me alone." "So powerful," Amon said in surprise. She couldn't beat Ning Chen. Didn't that mean that Marquis Ji Yu could beat 100 of her? Ning Chen nodded with certainty. In the barbarian dynasty, her father was probably the only one who could suppress Marquis Ji Yu. Every Marquis of Great Xia was more than just a little powerful. Compared to Senior? Amon asked curiously again. Senior can beat quite a few of him. Ning Chen cut off the road. The Great Xia has so many experts. Amon's tone was filled with envy. In the barbarian dynasty, there were pitifully few martial artists above rank 7, let alone these powerful experts. Ning Chen didn't reply. In truth, the barbarian dynasty was not weak. Although there were fewer martial artists, the soldiers of the barbarian dynasty were all brave and skilled in battle. They were not to be trifled with. Unless a martial artist reached the Xiantian realm, there was no way they could contend against the war machines. No matter how strong a Hotian martial artist was, there would be a time when they ran out of qi. Once they ran out of qi, in front of tens of thousands of soldiers, only death would await them. In the past few years, the barbarian dynasty and the Great Xia had clashed many times. The Great Xia had also suffered many casualties. In the end, the Great Xia Emperor had sent one of the 10 marquises, Marquis Gu, to personally suppress him. Only then did the barbarian dynasty gradually settle down. Of course, there was no need for him to say this to Amon. He also wouldn't say it. Amon's way of thinking was actually very simple. She could clearly distinguish between right and wrong, right and wrong. If it was right, she would do it. If it was wrong, she wouldn't do it. There was no need to beat around the bush. Sometimes, he really liked to talk to Amon. He didn't need to think about this and that. He only needed to simplify things and he would be able to get along well with her. For example, if he were to talk about the strength of martial arts in detail, Amon wouldn't be able to understand. But if he simply quantified the strength of martial arts, Amon would be able to understand. In reality, could Marquis Gu really beat 100 of him? He didn't know. Maybe he could, maybe he couldn't. Maybe 100 wouldn't be enough. They had never fought before, so how would he know? However, that son of his was really weak. He could definitely beat 100 of him by himself. Chapter 65. That night, the moon hung high in the sky. Ning Chen was sitting alone in his room, preparing to meditate when he heard a knock on the door. The door isn't locked. Please come in, said Ning Chen. Creak. The person who came in was a man. Under the dim light of the night, her delicate and charming face was exceptionally moving. What's wrong? Asked Ning Chen with concern. I can't sleep. A man stood there, her words still so direct. It was just that it didn't seem appropriate for a man and woman to be alone together. But the two of them weren't ordinary people. One didn't care, and the other didn't care. So whether or not it was appropriate, she still came in. If you can't sleep, you can cultivate, suggested Ning Chen. This girl's talent wasn't bad, and she also had an extremely powerful father. Moreover, she had started cultivating from a young age, but she still hadn't reached 4th grade Hotian. He was speechless at this kind of progress. I don't want to cultivate. A man straightforwardly replied. Ning Chen was helpless. If she didn't want to cultivate, then so be it. The world didn't lack such experts. How about I accompany you for a chat? Suggested Ning Chen. Alright, what do you want to talk about? A man sat down in a serious manner. How did you convince your father to come with us? This was a question he had always known. The barbarian king didn't have a good impression of him, so logically speaking, he shouldn't have agreed to let a man come with them. I didn't tell him, said a man honestly. You didn't? Ning Chen was covered in cold sweat. You left in a hurry, and I found out late, so I didn't say anything. A man nodded. Ning Chen felt a chill run down his back. That was a powerful person who could fight with the Yen prince, and he was also a Xiantian. If he kidnapped his daughter like this, wouldn't the barbarian king tear him apart? Why didn't the barbarian king's palace stop you? Ning Chen was very unhappy. That was their princess. Weren't they afraid of losing her? Why would they stop me? A man didn't understand. It wasn't her first time leaving the palace. That's true. Ning Chen helplessly nodded. In the world that a man lived in, she could do whatever she wanted. She was a princess. Other than the barbarian king, she had the highest authority. Let alone leaving the palace, even if she blew up the palace, the barbarian king's first concern would be whether or not a man was accidentally injured. Thinking back to how he had almost been killed by the furious Zhang Sun in order to leave the palace, now that he thought about it and compared himself to a man, his heart immediately felt sour. People couldn't be compared to each other. Otherwise, they would be angered to death. Then aren't you going to write a letter to your father? Ning Chen reminded her tactfully. With this girl's personality, it was very likely that she had never thought about this matter. Sure enough, a man frowned when she heard this, and then she nodded vigorously. All right, I'll go back and write a letter. As soon as she finished speaking, a man stood up and left without the slightest hesitation. Ning Chen was stunned. He felt that there was still a generation gap between him and this lady. Weren't they just chatting? Is it appropriate for you to leave like this? However, considering this girl's usual style, he decided that he had to adapt himself. After the conversation ended, Ning Chen prepared to extinguish the lamp. He didn't cultivate or adjust his breathing, but instead went straight to rest. He didn't have enough brains. He needed to reflect on himself. However, at this moment, there was a knock on the door again. The door isn't locked. Please come in, Ning Chen said helplessly. Prince Yen pushed the door open and entered. Sensing the familiar aura in the air, he asked calmly, "A man came by?" "Yes, she just left." Ning Chen nodded and didn't hide anything. Prince Yen didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he stated his purpose of coming. "I might have to leave for a while." Ning Chen frowned and asked, "How long?" Prince Yen thought for a while and replied, "About 7 days." Ning Chen felt a trace of uneasiness, but he couldn't tell why. He hoped that he was overthinking. "When are you leaving?" Ning Chen asked. "Tonight," Prince Yen replied with certainty. "Senior, don't worry. A man and I will take care of ourselves," Ning Chen said calmly. Prince Yen nodded and then reminded him one last time, "Don't be rash. If there's anything, wait for me to come back." Ning Chen nodded his head and agreed. Prince Yen thought for a while. His face flashed and he returned to his middle-aged appearance. Ning Chen was slightly surprised and asked, "Senior, why are you doing this?" Prince Yen said calmly, "If I don't get old, someone will be very uneasy." Ning Chen opened his mouth but didn't say anything. Did someone as strong as Prince Yen have to worry about that person's feelings? Prince Yen left. However, as soon as he left, someone unexpected came. It was the master of the prince's residence, Prince Yu. He didn't have any impression of Prince Yu. Today was the first time they met, and they didn't even speak a word. "May I know why Prince Yu is here?" Ning Chen asked politely. I had nothing to do at night, so I came to sit," Prince Yu said with a smile. Ning Chen sneered in his heart. Nonsense. The night was long and he didn't want to sleep. He wanted to sleep more than anyone else, but they kept coming one after another. Were they not done yet? A man didn't say anything. It didn't matter how long he sat here. He would treat him like an ancestor. Prince Yen didn't say anything either. This was his current boss, so he had to treat him well. But why did a Prince Yu come to a small eunuch's room in the middle of the night instead of sleeping? "I'm honored that you've come in person." Ning Chen smiled obsequiously. He was already so skilled that he couldn't be more skilled. Wasn't it just wrangling? He wouldn't sleep tonight. He'd keep you company. "Ning Chen, how long have you been in the palace?" Prince Yu asked with a warm expression. Ning Chen calculated, then said, "Half a year." He should still be a person with an official position. Zhang Sun and Emperor Xia hadn't put his affairs on the table, even though they both knew he couldn't go back. "What do you think of His Majesty?" Prince Yu asked, intentionally or otherwise. "He knows how to use people well. He's magnanimous." He follows advice readily. He's kind and loves the people. He's good at war. He's wise and powerful. He's a virtuous ruler. Ning Chen recited fluently. After saying that, Ning Chen glanced at Prince Yu, who was in a daze. He thought to himself, that's not enough, right? I have more. For example, he's diligent in government affairs. He's never stopped reading. He's strict with himself. He's eloquent. He's elegant. He's wise and prudent. He's someone who participated in the most terrifying imperial examinations in the world, the Gaokao. Being able to recite a few idioms was the most basic of the basics. Prince Yu was indeed in a daze. He hadn't expected someone to be able to flatter him to this extent. He'd said so much without repeating anything. It was said that the little eunuch by the Empress' side was extraordinarily talented. Seeing him today, he really lived up to his reputation. No wonder he could force the emissary of the Kingdom of Truth to retreat again and again. However, he didn't believe this nonsense at all. In this world, Emperor Xia was definitely at the top of the list of people who wanted Ning Chen dead the most. The current Emperor Xia was very suspicious. After the incident at Jingxi Palace, he would definitely want to control Ning Chen firmly. The result was obvious. Ning Chen had escaped from the palace. He'd made his attitude clear. Emperor Xia wouldn't be lenient. A straightforward person doesn't resort to insinuations. Little brother Ning, can you tell me what you really think? Prince Yu chuckled and asked politely. Ning Chen was a little surprised. What do you mean, Prince? Every word I say comes from the bottom of my heart. What insinuations are there? Hearing this, Prince Yu frowned slightly, and an undetectable light flashed in his eyes. This kid really was impervious to everything, and he was watertight. A few days ago, he'd found out that this kid had caused quite a commotion in the imperial city. In the end, the Empress had personally come and escorted him out of the imperial city. This kind of grace had never appeared in the 1,000-year history of the Xia kingdom. The reason why he valued this person so much was partly because of the Empress and partly because of Prince Yan. If someone had told him before that he would one day try his best to rope in a little eunuch, he wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. However, the truth was right in front of him. He had no choice but to put down his pride and talk nicely with this kid. Ning Chen didn't know what Prince Yu's real purpose was. However, he could still hear the hidden intention of roping him in. No one was perfect, but one would be finished. He couldn't figure out what Prince Yu wanted to do, so he definitely couldn't step on this pirate ship. No matter how big the world was, it couldn't be bigger than a person's ambition. No one in the imperial family was easy to deal with. He had to be very careful. He'd already caused a lot of trouble for Zhang Sun. He really couldn't cause any more trouble. Prince Yu saw that there wouldn't be any progress if they continued talking like this. Thus, he stood up and said seriously, Ning Chen, I really admire your talent. I sincerely hope that you can work for me. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. Finally, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He'd thought he'd have to continue feigning civility for a while. Unfortunately, he had to continue pretending. After gathering his emotions, Ning Chen pretended to be terrified and said, Thank you for your kindness, Prince. However, a servant can't serve two masters. The Empress has treated me so well. How can I serve another master? Prince Yu frowned again. Could it be that he hadn't made it clear enough? He wanted Ning Chen to work for him mainly because he needed his right to speak beside Prince Yan and the Empress. What use did he have for him? He already had many servants in his residence. He didn't need another one. Ning Chen didn't wait for Prince Yu to continue speaking. He respectfully asked him to leave. Prince, it's late. You must be tired. Please go back and rest. The anger in Prince Yu's heart rose, but he still suppressed it. He looked at Ning Chen and said, Ning Chen, this prince knows that you already understand this prince's intentions. I hope that you can seriously consider it. Wealth, glory, splendor, and a high position are all not a problem. With that, Prince Yu turned and left. He couldn't hold it in any longer. He needed to leave and calm down. Ning Chen was a key person. He also had a terrifying weapon. Once he could use him, he could accomplish great things. Since Emperor Xia couldn't tolerate this person, then he'd use him. Everyone had weaknesses. Either glory, wealth, or power. As long as the price was right, he didn't believe that anyone would be stupid enough to refuse. Ning Chen watched Prince Yu leave. Then, he waved his hand and closed the door with a bang. He went back to bed. Was he stupid? Of course he wasn't. Prince Yu's last words had vaguely revealed a domineering aura and ambition. No matter if his guess was right or not, he couldn't get on Prince Yu's boat. In this world, other than glory, and high positions, there was something else called life. Now that Emperor Xia wanted to kill him, he had Zhang Sun to protect him. If his guess was right, and he still recklessly followed Prince Yu, then the first person to chop off his head would be Zhang Sun. He wasn't afraid of death, but he didn't want to court death. Moreover, he didn't like Emperor Xia only because Emperor Xia wanted to kill him. Other than that, he didn't have any dissatisfaction with Emperor Xia. Now that the Grand Xia had external troubles, they couldn't have internal troubles. Chapter 66. The restless night passed quickly. When dawn came, a man got up early and went out to send a letter. With the steward of Prince Yu's residence accompanying her, the officials at the relay station did not dare to be negligent. They received the letter and sent someone to send it out. A man returned to the residence happily, only to see a group of fully armed soldiers surrounding Prince Yu's residence. The soldiers were all the personal guards of Marquis Yu's residence. They were all dressed in armor and had a murderous aura. One could feel the coldness of the armor even from a distance. In the middle of the personal guards was a young man whose hands and arms were covered in bandages. A man recognized him at a glance. It was the annoying fellow from yesterday. The steward stopped a man from going forward. These people did not come with good intentions. He could not let the guests of the residence be implicated. However, what the steward did not know was that these people were provoked by the two guests, a man and Ning Chen, and the residence was the party that could be implicated. Prince Yu walked out of the residence and saw the personal guards of Marquis Yu's residence. He could not help but frown. At the same time, there was a trace of anger. Marquis Yu's residence did not take him, a prince, seriously. They actually dared to surround the residence in public. Go in and search. Seeing the door of the residence open, Ji Yuntang, who was about to send people to break the door, waved his hand and said angrily, "Yes." The soldiers bowed and received the order. They stood up and were about to barge into the residence. Presumptuous! Prince Yu shouted and walked forward with a gloomy face. Ji Yuntang, don't go too far. Prince Yu, don't blame me for not giving you face. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for taking in someone who should not have been taken in. Ji Yuntang, who was blinded by anger, tore off all his pretense and said with a murderous tone. At this moment, Ning Chen, who heard the commotion outside, turned his wheelchair and walked out unhurriedly. When he saw the fully armed soldiers around him, he felt helpless. Is there going to be a fight again? He looked down on Ji Yuntang very much. You were the one who started it, and you were the one who attacked first. After you could not win, you still called for help. A man saw Ning Chen come out and jogged to the latter's side. She asked uneasily, is there going to be a fight again? Yes. Ning Chen nodded. It seemed like this was very possible. Yesterday, he had just promised Prince Yan that he would not fight again. He did not expect that he would have to make an exception today. That's him. Capture him, dead or alive. When Ji Yuntang saw Ning Chen, he immediately furrowed his brows and shouted. Wait! Prince Yu took a step forward and stopped him. Arrest him. Ji Yuntang ignored him and said angrily. Yes. All the guards received their orders, and then their voices resounded as they swiftly surrounded Ning Chen and a man. Let's see who dares. A strange light flashed through Prince Yu's eyes. He was furious and wanted to block the two of them. Take him to the side, ordered Ji Yuntang. He knew he couldn't hurt Prince Yu. Yes. Two guards stepped forward and held Prince Yu to the side, preventing him from interfering. You guys. Prince Yu looked helpless as he glanced at Ning Chen apologetically. Seeing that apologetic gaze, Ning Chen smiled brightly. However, he sneered inside. This show was too fake. A grand prince was subdued just like that? He was putting so much effort into acting because he wanted to see just how strong he was. Then, when he was in the most danger, he would erupt and even risk his life to save him, making him owe him a huge favor. It would be best if he would be so moved that he would swear loyalty to him. He had already told a man who knew how many times this lousy plot was like a story. Even if he was scheming, he needed someone to cooperate with him. However, he was very sorry. He really could fight now and did not need anyone's help. On the side, the man did not care about their sinister performance. Instead, she looked inside the residence. Seeing that Prince Yen was not there, she asked curiously, "Where's Senior?" "He went on a long trip," replied Ning Chen. "Oh," replied the man softly. In the next moment, a trace of excitement flashed through her eyes. "Then can we fight?" Ning Chen glanced at the man in surprise. Although he knew that this girl's thoughts were very direct and jumping around, could this matter be understood in such a way? Shouldn't the usual reaction be to worry that no one would protect them? He thought about it carefully. That made sense. Without Prince Yen, the most direct effect was that they could fight. It turned out that the uneasiness in Man's eyes was not because she was worried about the trouble they had caused, but because she was worried about what would happen if Prince Yen found out about the fight. Under such a heavy atmosphere, this girl could still think like this. Her train of thought was indeed very valiant. "Are you going to stand beside me or watch from afar?" Ning Chen glanced at the guards surrounding him and asked softly, "Are you going to stand beside me or watch from afar? Will I be a burden to you if I watch from here?" Man asked awkwardly. Ning Chen glanced at them again, thought for a moment, and said, "It's fine. My opponents are weaker. I can still take care of them. Then I'll watch from here," Wild said without hesitation. The two of them spoke very softly, but the bodyguards present were all ranked martial artists after all. For a moment, their faces were unusually gloomy. This young man was too arrogant. "Go!" With a heavy shout and the clanging of armors, the battle sabers were drawn and slashed towards Ning Chen. A man stood to the side, excitedly looking at the saber light. There was no fear in her eyes. Ning Chen said that he would protect her. He would definitely not let anything happen to her. Dang! The ink sword was drawn, and the saber light in front of him was repelled. The wheelchair took half a step forward, and the saber light behind him also missed. A man stood to the side. Although it seemed dangerous, it was actually the safest. The bodyguard sabers were all aimed at Ning Chen. Even if they missed, they would be immediately repelled by the ink sword. The bodyguards of Marquis Gu's residence were mostly 5th rank and below. After all, the bodyguards of Marquis Gu could not compare to Emperor Xia's shadows and dark dragon guards. Moreover, Ning Chen was no longer the martial arts idiot of the past. It was not difficult for him to deal with them. Taking into account the existence of Marquis Gu, Ning Chen did not want to kill him. Between the moves, there was not much killing intent. The more the bodyguards fought, the more shocked they became. They discovered that they could not do anything to the youth in front of them. Peng Peng, another two figures flew out and smashed into the stone ground in front of the prince's residence. They could not get up for a while. Kill! Suddenly, 3 bodyguards exploded with all their strength. Bypassing Ning Chen's sword, they mercilessly slashed their sabers at A Man. Ah Man did not react, but Ning Chen did. His sword repelled the two sabers, and then with a twist, his sword went for the throat. The third bodyguard blankly fell to the ground, blood spraying 3 feet high from his throat. Ning Chen's expression was gloomy. He had held back because he did not want to completely offend Marquis Gu. But that did not mean he did not dare to kill him. Ah Man, move back. Ning Chen gently pulled Ah Man behind him. His eyes coldly looked at the bodyguards who were still trying to surround them. Since you want to die, then don't live. In the next instant, Ning Chen's sword and body moved. Everyone only saw a blur before their eyes. The snow in front of them was the last thing they saw before death. Immediately after, the ink light continuously danced, bringing with it a spray of blood. Not long after, the ground was littered with corpses. It was a shocking scene. In the blink of an eye, there were no longer any people standing around the wheelchair. Ji Yuntang was dumbfounded. Prince Yu also frowned. None of them had expected Ning Chen to be so powerful. Ning Chen put away his sword. His chest felt a bit stuffy. That was a sign his injuries were not stable. There was a reason why Senior had not allowed him to fight. If he used up too much of his true qi, there was a chance his injuries would erupt. Ah Man, push me back, said Ning Chen softly. Oh, okay. Ah Man ran over and pushed Ning Chen back into the prince's residence. Before entering the prince's residence, Ning Chen turned to look at Prince Yu. He respectfully said, "Thank you for protecting me just now." Ning Chen is endlessly grateful. Prince Yu raised an eyebrow and forced a smile. "You're too courteous." Ning Chen then glanced at Ji Yuntang. "Young Marquis, I advise you to think of a way to explain what happened today. I think Marquis Gu still doesn't know that you privately mobilized troops to surround the prince's residence. You're on your own now." Neither he nor Ji Yuntang could escape responsibility for what happened today. Privately mobilizing troops to surround the prince's residence was a huge crime. Massacring the Marquis's personal guards was also a huge crime. If they really wanted to argue about it, both of them would be beheaded. If Marquis Gu didn't want his son to die, then this matter could only be suppressed in secret. After returning to the prince's residence, Ning Chen was finally unable to suppress the stuffy feeling in his chest. He violently coughed twice, and a trace of blood seeped out from between his fingers. Ah Man's face turned pale with fright. She hastily used her sleeve to wipe away the blood. She sobbed, "Don't scare me. Don't die." Ning Chen was helpless. Who said that vomiting blood would definitely lead to death? If that was the case, who knew how many times he would have already died? "Don't worry, I'm fine." Seeing that if a man was about to cry, Ning Chen forcefully endured the feeling of spitting out another mouthful of blood and spoke with great difficulty. "Really?" Ah Man didn't believe him. "Really?" Ning Chen nodded with certainty. "Ah Man, Go out for a moment. I'll change my clothes." "Okay." After coaxing Ah Man to leave, Ning Chen covered his mouth and vomited a mouthful of blood. The blood flowed out from between his fingers and dyed most of his clothes red. Fortunately, Ah Man was a straightforward person. She believed whatever he said. In the northern plains, a young general quickly walked into the commander's tent and said respectfully, reporting to the military advisor, "Prince Yan left Tianfu City last night." Fan Lingyue was currently sitting in front of a table in the tent with her eyes closed in deep thought. After about 3 breaths of time, she calmly asked, "Has Si Mingjian set off?" "They set off this morning and will reach Tianfu City in 3 days, the young general replied. "Very good. You may leave." Fan Lingyue nodded and said, "Yes." The young general bowed respectfully, then turned and left. After the general left, Fan Lingyue slowly opened her eyes. She looked at the wooden box in front of the table and sighed softly. "I hope you like the opponent I prepared for you." Prince Yan's departure was arranged by her. In this world, the only place Prince Yen could go and Ning Chen could not was the Great Xia Palace. And the only one who could summon Prince Yen back to the palace was Emperor Xia. She could not control Emperor Xia, but she could control Emperor Xia's officials. There were many officials in Great Xia, and not all of them were righteous people. She simply made 4 officials work together to write a memorial and secretly spread the rumor of Prince Yen colluding with the enemy to every corner of Emperor Xia's city. Many people in the world knew that Prince Yen went to the barbarian dynasty a few days ago and stayed in the barbarian palace for a long time. Emperor Xia was a suspicious person. Even if he knew that this was very likely a rumor, he would definitely summon Prince Yen back to the palace to explain. Zhang Sun was not by her side, and Prince Yen had left. Ning Chen was at his weakest now. She only needed to seize this opportunity and send people to get rid of him. The variable she was worried about would disappear forever. Unfortunately, they were so similar. If it were not for their different standpoints, perhaps they could really be friends. However, there were no hypotheticals in this world. She would not be soft-hearted because of this so-called mutual appreciation. Compared to the future of the Northern Meng imperial court, personal feelings were not worth mentioning. For this goal, she could sacrifice anyone, even herself. Chapter 67. The next day, Prince Yu's residence received an invitation letter. It was for Ning Chen, written by Marquis Ji Yu himself. It was written with a strong force that penetrated the back of the paper. There was a hint of dominance in the firmness. One look and one could tell that it was the handwriting of a master at the peak of martial arts. Ning Chen received the letter. This time, he didn't bring a man with him. Instead, he went by himself. He didn't know what kind of person Marquis Ji Yu was, so he couldn't take a man with him. Logically speaking, as a martial Marquis of de Xia, he should not be an unreasonable person, but it was hard to know what was in a person's heart. He had to be on guard. If it wasn't for the fact that the invitation letter was for him, and that it was written by Marquis Ji Yu himself, he wouldn't have come at all. He had all kinds of habits in his life, but he didn't have the habit of seeking death. Furthermore, with the example of the Northern Martial Marquis, his impression of the Great Xia Martial Marquis was very average. He wondered how Emperor Xia would react after reading the letter. Marquis residence of Ji Yu was not far from Prince Yu's residence. In this Tianfu city, the Marquis residence and the Prince residence were the 2 strongest forces. The Marquis residence existed to suppress Prince Yu's residence in addition to intimidating the barbarians. Emperor Xia was indeed very wary of his brothers. Only Prince Yen, who had no interest in power, was able to make Emperor Xia feel slightly more at ease. When they arrived at Marquis Ji Yu's residence, the gates were wide open and a heavily armored general personally came out to welcome them. Ning Chen couldn't help but frown. Just what was this Marquis Ji Yu planning? He didn't think that Marquis Ji Yu would be so magnanimous. His son had just been beaten to a pulp. It was already good enough that he didn't care about it, but he actually sent someone to welcome him. It was too abnormal. In the main hall of the house of Marquis Ji Yu sat on the main seat with a refined expression. He read the book in his hand while drinking the tea brewed by the maid in front of him. No matter how one looked at it, the person in front of him looked more like a scholar than a marquis. Ning Chen entered the hall and looked at Marquis Ji Yu. Marquis Ji Yu also put down the book in his hand and looked at Ning Chen. After a long time, he lightly smiled and said, "As expected, heroes come from the youth." "Marquis, you flatter me," Ning Chen replied politely. "Do you know why this Marquis is looking for you?" Marquis Ji Yu did not beat around the bush and asked directly. "Please explain, Marquis," Ning Chen said respectfully. "Jingqi Palace." Marquis Ji Yu said these 3 words with a straight face. He didn't say it clearly, but he had already made his objective clear. Ning Chen smiled happily. His smile was very bright. So this was what he wanted. He knew it. How could there be such a magnanimous person in this world? Since he had a favor to ask of others, he could even tolerate his son's revenge. What kind of price is the Marquis willing to pay? Ning Chen's eyes narrowed as he pretended to consider. What do you want? Marquis Ji Yu asked back. Marquis, your question is a little insincere. If you want my things, you have to show enough sincerity, Ning Chen said with a light smile. Marquis Ji Yu pondered for a moment before saying, I can invite a Xiantian to help you cleanse your meridians and heal your legs. Hearing this, Ning Chen sneered in his heart, but his face was very cooperative and showed an excited expression. He eagerly said, Is what Marquis said true? Can a primordial master really cure my legs? Xiantian is omnipotent. Marquis Ji Yu nodded. Nonsense, Ning Chen sneered in his heart. You think I haven't seen a Xiantian before? The Xiantian I know is almost enough to form a table of mahjong. Although he thought this in his heart, his face still showed an even more tangled and struggling expression, as if he was experiencing an intense psychological struggle. I wonder which Xiantian master the Marquis can invite? After struggling for a while, he saw Ning Chen exhale and make up his mind. This matter cannot be revealed for now. However, as long as you take out the thing, I will arrange it, Marquis Ji Yu promised as he drank a mouthful of tea. Can't you heal my legs first? Ning Chen's eyes clearly flashed with a trace of disappointment. He was unwilling to give up. This matter cannot be rushed. Cleansing meridians is not something that can be done in a day or two. Even a Xiantian master will use up a lot of Jin Yuan, so I need to pay a large enough price in advance. If I don't see the thing, wouldn't I suffer too much? Marquis Ji Yu said sincerely but fearlessly. He believed that Ning Chen would make a choice. Compared to his legs, these worldly things were useless to him. His Majesty was too anxious, too extreme. That was why he had forced Ning Chen to run away again and again, leaving no room for negotiation. Marquis, please allow me to think about it. I will definitely give you an answer in the near future. Ning Chen's expression changed again and again. How long? Marquis Ji Yu indifferently asked. 10 days, no, 5 days. Ning Chen thought for a moment before saying. All right, I will give you 5 days. After 5 days, I will wait for your answer, Marquis Ji Yu nodded and said seriously. Many thanks, Marquis, Ning Chen respectfully said. General Li, help me send the guest off. Marquis Ji Yu glanced at the heavy-armored general beside him. Yes. The heavy-armored general stepped forward and bowed, please. Ning Chen nodded and then turned his wheelchair to walk out of the hall. Suddenly, the wheelchair stopped. Ning Chen turned around and glanced at Marquis Ji Yu. He softly said, Marquis, Prince Yu also mentioned this matter to me last night. He also promised a high position and a generous salary, as well as glory, splendor, wealth, and rank. Although Ning Chen is not interested in these things, I still have some doubts. Glory, splendor, wealth, and rank are still fine, but isn't a high position and a generous salary something only His Majesty can decide? Hearing this, Marquis Ji Yu's eyes slightly narrowed. Thank you for the reminder. Ha! Ning Chen softly laughed, turned around, and immediately continued walking forward. When he was about to leave the hall, a calm voice came from behind him. If possible, please let me see the power of that thing in your hand with my own eyes. I hope it won't disappoint me. Ning Chen's lips curled into a strange arc, definitely. After saying this, the wheelchair moved forward and quickly disappeared. Father. After Ning Chen left, Ji Yuntang walked out from the back of the hall and asked with an unwilling expression, why didn't you keep him and avenge your son? Idiot. Marquis Ji Yu coldly snorted and said, now, the entire Prince Yu's mansion knows that Ning Chen came to Marquis Ji Yu's mansion. If you make a move at this time, do you want to attract the wrath of the Empress and Prince Yan? Don't cause trouble for me in the future. This Ning Chen isn't someone you can touch. After saying this, a dangerous light flashed in Marquis Ji Yu's eyes. It was fine if this kid didn't make a move, but once he made a move, he had to kill him in one strike and not leave any future troubles. Yes. Ji Yuntang was unwilling, but he didn't dare to go against his father's wishes. He could only retreat with a heart full of anger. Marquis Ji Yu sighed softly. Although this child of his appeared to be tolerant on the surface, he wasn't that scheming. Compared to Ning Chen just now, he was not just a little bit worse. Ning Chen's last words had really stabbed Prince Yu fiercely. What was even more subtle was that the former was still living in Prince Yu's mansion. Thinking of the meaning of that sentence, Marquis Ji Yu narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Prince Yu, what exactly do you want to do? Could it be that you're still daydreaming that can't be realized? After returning to Prince Yu's mansion, Prince Yu immediately went forward to see Ning Chen and expressed his concern. Ning Chen responded with a smile, indicating that he didn't suffer any excessive difficulties. There was a hidden meaning in his words. Prince Yu could tell that although Ning Chen was hiding it with a smile, his words still inadvertently revealed a bit of anger and unwillingness. Prince Yu guessed that it was very likely that Ning Chen had suffered difficulties in Marquis Ji Yu's mansion. This was a good thing. The worse the relationship between Ning Chen and Marquis Ji Yu's mansion, the more likely it was that Ning Chen would side with him. Prince Yu comforted him with a few words of concern and then left with great satisfaction. After Ning Chen dealt with Prince Yu, he returned to his residence and saw a man walking around in circles in boredom in the courtyard. He smiled lightly and stretched out his hand to call out, "A man, come here for a moment." It was really too boring to talk with those cunning old foxes, to the point that he was now full of nonsense and not a single word of truth. Instead of smiling and wrangling with them and wasting time, it was better to accompany Ah Man and make her happier. In the courtyard, when Ah Man heard Ning Chen's voice, she immediately walked over with a bright smile and asked charmingly, "What? I'm taking you to do something fun. Do you want to come?" Ning Chen asked with a smile. "Yes," Man replied without hesitation. "Come, push the wheelchair," said Ning Chen. Ah Man obediently walked behind Ning Chen and pushed the wheelchair. She reminded him, "You can't fight anymore." Ning Chen nodded and said, "Yes, I won't fight." He understood that the miserable sight of him vomiting blood yesterday had frightened Ah Man and left a bad shadow in her heart when it came to fighting. In this world, the most difficult person to understand was Ah Man, but the easiest person to understand was also Ah Man. So many people had died yesterday, but Ah Man didn't even blink. But after seeing him vomit blood, she immediately panicked. The reason was actually very simple. Ah Man's world was never bound by any rules. She believed that he was right, and he would always be right. Then the people who fought with him would definitely be wrong. "After you went out this morning, I was so bored by myself," Ah Man straightforwardly said the words in her heart. "There won't be a next time. In the future, I'll definitely bring you along," promised Ning Chen. "Where are we going?" asked Ah Man curiously. "To buy things." "The cloth shop and pharmacy," replied Ning Chen. "I don't have money," said Ah Man honestly. "No problem, I have money," said Ning Chen generously. Prince Yan's salary was in his hands. He would borrow it first and return it when he had money. However, this girl Ah Man didn't bring a single copper coin when she went out. She really was careless. The cloth shop. As they walked, Wild pointed at a tailor shop in front of them and reminded them. "Go in," ordered Ning Chen. The two of them entered the cloth shop. Then Ning Chen looked at the cloth on the table and pointed at the cheapest bolt. "I want half a foot." The owner of the cloth shop looked disdainfully at the youth in front of him. He had seen stingy people before, but he had never seen such a stingy person. "I'm not selling half a foot," said the owner unhappily. Ning Chen frowned. Just as he was about to reason with the owner, a man pointed at the most beautiful bolt of silk on the rack. "I want that." The color of the silk was light and elegant. It wasn't too thick or bright, and it was smooth and flawless. It was clearly a famous product and was very expensive. Ning Chen clenched his teeth and said, "I'll buy it." Hearing this, the owner's expression immediately changed. He smiled so widely that he couldn't close his mouth. Alright, young master also wants this bolt of cloth, right? No need to cut it, I'll give it to you for free. Ning Chen clenched his teeth and paid the money. Then he took the 2 bolts of cloth and left. How could he have forgotten that although this girl was different from ordinary people, she was still a princess? How could ordinary people compare to her taste? Most importantly, she was still a woman. When she saw beautiful things, she would subconsciously want them. 2 bolts of cloth, 130 taels of silver. This bolt of cloth was only enough to cover his head. What kind of silk was this? It was clearly made of silver. Ah man, what are you buying it for? Ning Chen's heart bled as he asked. To make clothes. Ah man's eyebrows curved as she smiled. Don't you already have a lot of clothes? Ning Chen didn't understand. When Ah man came out with them, she didn't bring anything other than clothes. However, other than clothes, she really didn't have anything else to bring. I don't have this kind of clothes yet, replied Ah man matter-of-factly. Ning Chen didn't know what to say. He had really tried his best, but he still couldn't keep up with Ah man's thoughts. Chapter 68. After they finished looking around the cloth shop, Man pushed Ning Chen to find a pharmacy. Nanjiang was rich in medicinal stones, and the business was very good. Everywhere, there were caravans coming to buy medicinal stones. Ning Chen found a pharmacy and began to buy as much as he could. He had already spent over 100 taels, so he didn't care about the change. Not long after, a large sack was filled to the brim. There were at least 20 to 30 different types of medicinal stones. After the 2 of them finished buying, they immediately returned to the prince's residence. They closed the door and began to work. There were too many types of medicinal stones, and most of them were useless. Ning Chen only bought them to confuse the people who were secretly following him. Prince Yu and Marquis Yu clearly wanted to know the secret recipe for the explosives, so he had to be very careful. What is this? A man looked at the strange thing that Ning Chen had cut out of cotton and asked in confusion. A mask, Ning Chen replied. Last time in the palace, he and General Ling almost choked to death when he used these medicinal stones. This time, he had to make sure to protect himself. After sewing the layers of masks, Ning Chen was about to put them on when he suddenly stopped. He looked at Ah Man and smiled mischievously. Ah Man, lower your head. Why? Ah Man didn't notice Ning Chen's strange smile. She obediently moved her delicate little face closer and asked curiously. You'll know in a moment. Ning Chen carefully put the mask in his hand on Ah Man's face and moved back in his wheelchair to take a closer look. It really was unbearable to look at. Ning Chen glanced at his hand. This hand was really like a foot. It couldn't do anything. A man looked at Ning Chen's strange expression and walked in front of the mirror. After looking, her mouth couldn't help but twitch. So ugly. Ning Chen was ashamed. This girl was too straightforward. She didn't even consider his feelings. It'll be very choking later, Ning Chen explained without much confidence. So it's best to wear this. Do you want to wear it? No. A man shook her head and refused without hesitation. Ning Chen silently took the mask off a man's face and put it on himself. If she didn't want to wear it, then so be it. If she didn't want to look, she could make it herself. In the next moment, what made Ning Chen want to bang his head against the wall was that a man really ran to the side and made one herself. She finished it in just a few moments, and her appearance was many times better than his. Comparisons were odious. Ning Chen's self-esteem was hurt. He could only comfort himself in his heart. Just because it looked good, it didn't mean it was useful. The most important thing was to be able to withstand the flying ashes of the medicine. Saltpeter was the most choking material among the raw materials, so Ning Chen had to do it himself. Grinding charcoal was safe, non-toxic, and didn't require much skill, so a man was naturally the one to do it. Cough, cough. Grind it up a little, Ning Chen said worriedly as he coughed. Oh. A man threw a piece of charcoal into the grinder. Cough, cough. Aren't you choking? Ning Chen asked again. It's all right. A man added another piece of charcoal and said casually. Why am I choking? Ning Chen twisted his head and said. I don't know, A man said honestly. Ning Chen was speechless. Why wasn't this girl enlightened? Couldn't she hear the hidden meaning in his words? How about you give me your mask and you make another one? With no other choice, Ning Chen could only embarrassedly say it out loud. Okay. A man nodded. She got up and took off her mask to help Ning Chen change it. Then she ran to the side and made another one. What a good girl. Ning Chen silently sighed. He immediately suppressed the melancholy in his heart and began to work. In truth, the current situation was quite good. It was good for both of them. After grinding the medicine, the next step was the most important part. Ning Chen held the scale in his hand and weighed the saltpeter powder, charcoal powder, and sulfur powder one by one. Then he mixed them according to the ratio. What is this? A man stood to the side and asked curiously. Explosives, Ning Chen replied. What is it used for? A man continued to ask curiously. Do you know what an explosion is? Ning Chen asked uncertainly. Was there such a thing in this era? I know, a man replied. Then it's easy to explain. Ning Chen let out a sigh of relief. He gestured with his hands as he explained, if this thing is ignited, it can cause a very, very, very large explosion. Oh. A man nodded as if she understood. Then she asked again, why are you making this thing? Someone is making me unhappy. Tomorrow I will go and blow up his door. Ning Chen angrily said. Don't fight. A man frowned and said. Don't fight. Ning Chen seriously said. I will also go. A man softly said. Okay, let's go together tomorrow. Ning Chen agreed. He had originally planned to bring A man along. The next day, early in the morning, Ning Chen brushed his teeth and washed his face. He was full of energy. Then he hugged his self-made revenge bomb and walked out the door. A man was already waiting at the door. When she saw Ning Chen come out, she went forward to help push his wheelchair. The two of them walked together towards Marquis Gu's mansion. The shops on the street had already opened and the day's work had begun. Very quickly, the two of them arrived at Wu Ho's mansion and stopped. The guards in front of Marquis Gu had seen Ning Chen yesterday and knew that he was Wu Ho's guest. Thus, their attitude was very polite. You two make way. Ning Chen said to the two guards at the door. The two guards frowned when they heard this, but they still took a few steps back. Make way again. Ning Chen felt that it was still not enough and requested again. The two guards retreated a few more steps. They looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. What was he trying to do? Ning Chen handed the bomb in his hand to A man. Then he took out a lighter and instructed, A man, put this thing at the door and light up the wire. After that you don't need to care about anything else. Quickly run. A man nodded. Although she did not understand, she would do as she was told. Ning Chen took one last look at Wu Ho's mansion and sneered in his heart. You want to see its power? You don't want to be disappointed? You can experience it for yourself. A man followed Ning Chen's instructions and placed the bomb in front of the mansion. She bent down and lit up the wire. Then she threw the lighter and immediately ran towards Ning Chen. Chi-chi, the fuse sizzled like the countdown of a clock. Just as Wild ran to Ning Chen's side, she heard an earth-shattering sound. An enormous cloud of fire erupted. In an instant, the heavens shook and the earth shook as rocks fell like rain. The mansion's main door disappeared and turned into fragments that filled the sky. Even the surrounding stone walls fell down. A man was shocked. The two guards were even more dumbfounded. Looking at the falling debris, they did not know whether it was the main door or the walls. Their brains were unable to react for a while. Beside Ning Chen, a man was the first to come back to her senses. In the next moment she smiled happily. Seeing this smile, Ning Chen felt a chill run down his spine. This girl was actually able to smile. Seeing this kind of scene for the first time, shouldn't she be scared witless? He really did not understand a man's world. Is there more? A man asked with some excitement. Ning Chen's eyelids jumped and he quickly shook his head, no more. I only made this one yesterday. Luckily, he only made one. A man was going to use it as a firecracker. Oh. A man replied with some disappointment. Let's go. Otherwise there will be another fight. Ning Chen called out. A man obediently followed and left. Just at this time, the Wuhou government's guards reacted. Just as they were about to go up and stop them, they were stopped by a heavy voice, no need to chase. As he spoke, Marquis Ji Yu walked out with a gloomy expression. He glanced at the door that had been blown beyond recognition, and then stared at the two people that were gradually disappearing into the distance. Anger, fear, and killing intent unceasingly emerged in his heart. After all his calculations, he had miscalculated this brat's terrifying schemes and guts. On the way, a man asked puzzledly, why aren't they chasing us? Ning Chen chuckled and said, because their Marquis wants the method to create that thing. He captured me. If I am not happy, I would rather die than surrender. Furthermore, he was the one who said he wanted to see the power of that thing. I am just following his instructions. A man nodded thoughtfully and honestly said, you are so treacherous. Ning Chen wanted to choke to death. When they returned to Prince Yu's residence, Prince Yu was already waiting for them. It was obvious that the news from the spies had spread faster than them, and had already informed Prince Yu. Prince Yu was shocked and happy at the same time. He was shocked because the power of that thing was as terrifying as the rumors said. He was happy because Ning Chen must have completely fallen out with Marquis Ji Yu's residence this time. Going to blow up someone else's residence, this was a blatant slap to their face. Prince Yu saw the two of them returning and immediately went up to them. Just as he was about to speak, he was stopped by Ning Chen. Ning Chen knew that he had to start acting and arguing with Prince Yu again. He was afraid that Ah Man would be bored, so he turned and said, Ah Man, you go back first. I have something to say to Prince Yu. Okay. Ah Man nodded obediently and then left by herself. After Ah Man left, Ning Chen apologized to Prince Yu, Prince, I am sorry. There are some things that I do not want Ah Man to know. This prince can understand, but you are too impulsive this time. Prince Yu's tone was filled with reproach. Ning Chen revealed an unconvinced expression and coldly snorted, they are the ones who have gone too far. Sigh. Prince Yu sighed and patiently advised, even so, no matter what, Marquis Ji Yu is a martial marquis personally conferred by Emperor Xia. If you slap his face like this, he will definitely not let this matter rest. He dares. Ning Chen had endured for a long time, and finally revealed an arrogant expression as he said angrily. A sneer flashed across Prince Yu's eyes. In the end, he was still a young man, and his patience was still lacking. Ning Chen, don't be impulsive. Think about it, no matter how much the Empress favors you, it's impossible for her to protect you every time. Not to mention Prince Yan, even though Third Brother's martial arts are extraordinary, he doesn't have any real power in his hands. To contend against a martial marquis whose martial arts are not inferior to his, how difficult is that? Prince Yu tried to reason with Ning Chen, hoping that Ning Chen would know the power of this. Sure enough, after hearing Prince Yu's analysis, Ning Chen's expression gradually became unsightly. Moreover, it became more and more unsightly and paler, as if he understood how much trouble he had caused today. Prince Yu's own words were effective, so he quickly struck while the iron was hot. How about this? This prince will help you deal with it, so that Marquis Ji Yu's estate will not find trouble with you. But, Marquis Ji Yu is a martial marquis after all, but Prince Yu. Ning Chen did not finish his sentence, and his face revealed a look of disbelief. Ah, you underestimate this prince too much. This prince can still deal with a mere Marquis. Prince Yu laughed out loud and took the opportunity to display his strength to Ning Chen, so that the latter would have a rough understanding of his strength. A hint of struggle flashed across Ning Chen's face as he said, "Prince, then what price do I have to pay?" He. Prince Yu laughed and shook his head. "Speaking of price is too much of an outsider. This prince is indeed very pleased with your talent. As long as you agree to work for this prince, Prince Yu's estate will always be your most powerful support." You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.